Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How's everyone doing? We're doing a post-debate analysis today, and we're going to talk about the question, how do we prove that Islam is true? This is a big topic. It's a big question. And I had a debate on this with an atheist named Matt Dillahunty a couple of weeks ago. And alhamdulillah, it was a good debate, definitely entertaining. And I want to give you my thoughts, my reaction. I want to also just go through the argument and explain and basically, hopefully, give you some information that will help you in your own debates and discussions with atheists or people who have doubts about God, people who have doubts about Islam being true. Hopefully you can get a lot out of this stream, inshallah. I'm also looking at the chat. I'm also looking at super chats. So if you want to get something read, just send in a super chat. Go to the link. It goes to muslimskeptic.com. You can put in your donation amount and then your message. I will read it on the stream, inshallah. And I'm going to try to answer your questions as much as possible. So hopefully everyone is doing well today. Alhamdulillah, the weather is getting cooler, so it's nice to have cooler weather. Alhamdulillah, just enjoying the creation of Allah. So what's the backstory of this debate? What really was happening behind the scenes? So this was a debate that was facilitated by Modern Day Debates. So Modern Day Debates, I have, they're the moderators basically for the majority of my debates. And I like working with Modern Day Debates. But there's like one very simple reality about Modern Day Debates is that most of their subscribers and followers are atheists. Most of them are atheists, and most of those atheists think that Matt Dillahunty is God's gift to atheism. That's that's the reality of Modern Day Debates. You have all of these Dillahunty fanboys, and they're just constantly on all of these debates I have on the platform, spamming the chat, spamming everything. So if I'm having a debate with Dillahunty, then it's going to be really nonstop Dillahunty, sucking up to him and making these really stupid remarks supporting him, comments supporting him. So anyway, that's just the nature of Modern Day Debates. It is what it is. And this was also the case at the venue. So whenever there's a debate in person, Modern Day Debates will host a convention, and then they'll have debaters go, and you'll have different sessions. So it's full of atheists, full of a lot of atheists, and they come and watch. Some of them are very respectful, others not so much. And this debate, it was just outrageous. Like the amount of heckling, just constantly, and you can't really hear it in the actual stream. But these atheists were just heckling nonstop in my opening statement and the open discussion. Matt and Dillahunty was playing to that audience. Like Dillahunty was making really not very funny, snarky remarks, but I don't know if it was a plant in the audience or just imagine Reddit and imagine the type of people that would be on Reddit, like the most dysgenic type of people. And I was facing 50 of them in an audience. Alhamdulillah, there were Muslims there as well. So shout out to the brothers, mashallah, who came out and supported. May Allah reward them. But it was just overwhelmingly these Reddit tier atheists. Like, just think of like the stereotypical atheist, like, the fedora type of image. Here, I'll bring you an image so you can visualize what I was seeing. Yeah, I think this is a good representation. This is what I was looking at at the debate, pretty much. You know, I think there might have been a few people with actual fedoras, but like every time Dillahunty made some comment, a guy who looks very similar to this, like literally looks very similar to this, was guffawing, was guffawing in the middle of the debate. So, had a couple of guys that look like this. Definitely some people who met this kind of archetype. So yeah, this is these are the type of people that are flooding modern day debates in general. But if it's a Matt Dillahunty debate, then these people, it's like a party. It's like a festival for them. They go buck wild. So imagine I'm just trying to paint the picture of what the venue was like. So we're sitting there, and for some reason the air conditioning wasn't really working in that room. So it wasn't like unbearable, but it was a little bit warmer, warmer than uh, you know than it would usually be if there was proper air conditioning. So you can imagine there's like a density to the air, and you have these like Reddit fedora wearing atheists sweating, sitting there. So it was not pleasant. It was not pleasant in that regard. And then you have, the person of Dillahunty himself, who is not a pleasant person in many respects. So that's what actually happened the day of. That's what happened the day of. What about prior? What about lead up to the debate? Well, there were plans to debate Dillahunty back in 2022 on the question of, is there good evidence for God? And so we were going through James, and I said, well, how about the next debate be with Dillahunty? We can do me versus him. And so what I want to debate is, okay, let's debate atheism, like an atheistic worldview versus Islam. And the answer was no. Dillahunty's answer was no. I only debate, is there good evidence for God? And notice, like, the way that it's set up is just prime for giving all of the burden to the theist, because not only do you have to show that there's evidence for God, it has to be good evidence. And who defines good? Who defines good? Who defines evidence? That is defined by Dillahunty. And as we'll see in my debate, he didn't want to actually be challenged on his definition of good evidence. He didn't want to be challenged on that. Just whatever he accepts as good evidence, that's gonna be that's the end of it. Don't tell me what is good evidence. I have my definition. You have to meet that definition. So this is how, like, if you look at Dillahunty, he just has dozens and dozens and dozens of debates on this. Is there good evidence for God? And they all have the same structure. They all have the same pattern, where he just sits and says, like, oh, no, that doesn't really meet my definition of evidence. That doesn't meet the bar. That doesn't meet the standard of evidence. And he presents his own standard as like, oh, imagine a court case. Like, we're in court. You have to bring me something that would fly in a court of law, for example, as an analogy. But when you want to question that, okay, why do we have that standard? Why do we have to adopt your definition of evidence? Then he gets very defensive, and he shuts down the debate. He says, the debate is not about evidence. The debate is about God. He just spams that. So that's what he did in the first part of our debate. Anyway, so that's what he initially wanted. He had some health problems in 2022. He had to get like some kind of heart surgery, or I don't know what, I don't care. And that was canceled. So instead I debated Aaron Raw last year. in Dallas. So R and Ra, you guys saw that debate, also a train wreck. These atheists are all train wrecks. And so that happened back in 2022. So then there was another opportunity, but now he's shifted. Dillahunty has shifted. No, if I'm going to debate a Muslim, I'm only going to debate, is Islam true? And that's the only thing I'm going to debate. And he's had multiple debates with a bunch of these Muslim debaters who, frankly, are terrible. They're absolutely garbage. And they can't really debate their way out of a paper bag. Like, let's be honest. The debate, and specifically the ones that recently Dillahunty has done with these Muslim debaters, they're garbage. I don't know where these debaters are. Some of them are Shia, I think. These are Shia debaters, and they are just absolutely terrible, doing a disservice to Islam. But look at the structure. I don't debate, is Islam true, just as an open topic. And that's what I said in setting up this debate. I said that, look, is Islam true? That is too broad of a question. And that puts too much of a burden on the Muslim to debate, is Islam true, if it's just unstructured. There needs to be a structure to a debate on, is Islam true? So any of you who are going to debate in the future, I want you to keep this in mind. Never agree to a debate on, is Islam true, unless there's a structure to it, because it's just too much of a burden on you. Why? The other side is just going to be able to gish gallop constantly and change the subject constantly. So if they'll bring up the point about, well, does the God even exist? So if God doesn't exist, then of course Islam is not true. So then you debate that. Then once you establish that, okay, we do have good evidence for God, we should believe in God, then they shift to, oh, well, what about these scientific inaccuracies, quote unquote, in the Quran? You address that. Then they shift, oh, but what about slavery in Islam? You address that. Then they shift back to, oh, well, but do we really have good evidence for God? Then you can't corner the opponent, basically. You can't corner the opponent, and you cannot really have a coherent debate when the opponent is constantly shifting the goalposts, constantly gish galloping, moving to different topics. What about women's rights in Islam? So then you address that. They talk about, well, what about religious intolerance? Then you have to address that. It's too much of a burden. So you have to structure it. And the structure that I recommend, and the structure of this debate, is that you have one topic or one section of the debate be about epistemology. So knowledge, how do we know that God exists? Maybe you can include things about like science in the Quran, like what are there, quote unquote, scientific inaccuracies in the Quran? That's just all epistemology related. Then you have the second section of the debate can be about the moral questions, like the morality of Islam. So when it comes to women's rights, blasphemy punishment, apostate punishment, concubines, jihad, all of those are addressed in a morality section of the debate. Like, let's justify Islamic morality. So when you're in that section of the debate, don't bring up epistemological questions. Don't bring up questions about, because that's already been addressed in the first part of the debate. We've already addressed knowledge. How do we know? We've compared Islamic epistemology, Islamic knowledge, understanding of God with the atheistic worldview. That has happened in the first section. In the second section or the third section, we're going to talk about morality. So it's a dedicated section. And then in the third section, you have to give a comparative argument, a comparative religious argument. Okay, so fine, Islamic morality is like this, Islamic epistemology is like this, but why should we accept Islam over other religions? Because you have all these other religions who also claim to be from God, or they also purport to represent the supernatural reality. Why should we accept Islam as opposed to Christianity or Buddhism or Judaism or Hinduism or Sikhism or Confucianism or whatever? That is the structure that I recommend, because you keep it organized, you keep it structured, and you can press the atheist or the whoever you're debating on key questions and force them to respond. And if they don't respond, they look bad, they look stupid. And that's what happened in this debate. Dillahunty refused to respond several questions. The most that he was able to respond to was in the second section. The second section was about comparative religion. He did admit, for example, that it is less compelling if to believe that there are 300 or 3,000 gods who manage the universe, as opposed to one creator god. He did say that the monotheism is intuitively more compelling. He did, in a roundabout way, he acknowledged that or conceded that, and other things. So that is, if there's any kind of debate on is Islam true, and it doesn't have this kind of structure or some structure, then it's going to be a very bad time. It's going to be a very difficult debate. And I really haven't seen any debate on this from Muslims that was successful. Because of this problem, a lack of structure. The atheists or the ex-Muslim or whoever, they love this type of unstructured debate because it puts all the cards in their hands. They just have a bunch of cards that they can play, and the Muslim just has to react to whatever card the atheist plays or the Mortad plays. So the ball is completely in their court, and it's not going to be satisfying for Muslims watching either. So that's my advice, and so that's why I insisted. And Dillahunty agreed. Dillahunty, I don't know if it was begrudging because it was James that was coordinating with him. He agreed to that kind of structure, and why shouldn't he? Like, why shouldn't he agree to debate? Is there good evidence for God? That was the first topic. So establishing that there is good evidence for God. It is more rational to believe that there's God as opposed to not. And then the second part was about, well, is Islam more compelling than other religions? And then third, secular morality versus Islamic morality, secular humanist morality versus Islamic morality. He agreed to that. What he wanted was, is Islam true? And then he also wanted the third topic, is Islamic morality versus secular humanist morality. And I think he was just going off of, because that's what I debated with Aaron Ra back in November. That's what I debated Aaron Ra, and Dillahunty was in the audience of that debate. So he was in person in the audience, and he asked like some dumb question in the Q&A. So I think he just wanted a chance to go at me on that specific topic. So he got his chance, and we saw the result. Like, he just had a meltdown, and descended into a fury of cursing and interjections, and it was just a real mess. So what I want to do for the rest of the stream, inshallah, is that I want to go through the opening statements. Let's go through my opening statements. His opening statements were really useless and worthless. Like, the only thing that Dillahunty does is there good evidence for God? I have to have scientific evidence. You have to like show me God in a microscope. You have to show me God in a telescope. And unless you show me God in a telescope, God is not real. Like, that's the level of argumentation of these idiots. So there's nothing that really is different about his openings. Like, he just repeats that like he has done in every single debate that he's in. But my opening, I want to go through it and give you guys more information, answer your questions, because a lot of people, I haven't seen this kind of argument presented before. For, is there good evidence for God? And I'll give you more information about the issues that are brought up in that opening. So let me share my screen. So here's a super chat from Salim. Watching your debates and talking sense to my atheist contacts, it becomes clear to me that no matter what you bring as arguments, there's no progression. I understand it's da'wah we do for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but could you explain me why debating these atheists like Matt is still useful? So this is a good question. Like, why even bother with atheists? So that's why I wanted to mention, like, when I go to these debate conventions hosted by Modern Day Debates, you have atheists there who will approach me and they've bought my book and they say, Daniel, I really like your debates. I appreciate your debates. And you've given me a new perspective on Islam. You've given me a new perspective on the rationality of religion. And I appreciate that. I'm no longer, or I'm still an atheist. I haven't converted. I haven't become a Muslim, but I have this kind of new understanding of Islam thanks to the debates that you do. And I can't. One guy was saying that I don't really see Sharia as this barbaric thing anymore. I see a lot of logic in it. So not all atheists are stubborn in this way. You can talk to them. You can converse with them. And sometimes it takes time. It takes time for people to come around, if, based on Allah's guidance. But even if they were completely stubborn and they did not accept debates, like don't ever accept Islamic arguments or become Muslim or whatever, it's still useful to debate because the atheistic arguments are posed against Islam, and we have to have a response. So when the atheist says, well, I can't see Allah in a microscope, therefore Islam is false, well, what is the response to that? You have to be able to respond. And that's what debate is. It might not take the form of a formal debate sitting across from someone, but it could happen online. It could happen on social media. It could happen in your family. It could happen with your parents, your children. What is the response? Do you have a rational response? That is the purpose of doing these debates. Let me see this. Okay, let me know if you can't hear.
And how's my volume?
Good.
Okay. It's bad. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah. The debate today is whether Islam is true. We've divided the debate into three sections or three parts. Is there good evidence for God? Is there any religion more compelling than Islam? And which is best for society, secular humanism or Islam? Debating these questions will allow us to answer the overarching question, is Islam true? First, is there good evidence for God? What kind of evidence is compelling evidence? When we ask, is there compelling evidence for God, we should also ask, compelling for whom? How do we decide what is or isn't compelling? It depends on the audience. If we were to ask 11th century Europeans if they found the existence of God compelling, virtually all of them would say yes. But if we ask 21st century Europeans, far fewer would say yes. So what's changed? Atheists claim people have just become smarter, more scientific, more in touch with reality. That's the atheist narrative. But I want to propose a competing narrative. Cognitive science says that human beings have natural intuitions, whether they're moral, religious, aesthetic, logical, or mathematical.
So, if someone like Dillahunty in the 11th century went up on a stage and or started, wrote a book and started speaking in public about how there is no God and there is no evidence for God, he would be seen as a crazy person. He would be seen as just an insane person and someone who maybe is possessed by the devil, and that's how he would be seen, not only in Europe, but also in Muslim society, in Chinese society, in African societies, in Native American societies. That's how he would be seen. This is just a crazy person, and they would boo him and throw rotten vegetables at him. Like, so is this because people in the past were just dumb? Were people in the past just so closed-minded they couldn't even consider the idea that God doesn't exist? Well, what explains that behavior? Like, what explains the difference? Why can Dillahunty have such a big following and have this kind of support, and people are like, oh yeah, he's such a brilliant mind. He says that you can't see God through a telescope. Wow, amazing. So what's the difference? Like, what has changed and what has shifted? And that's really the core of this debate on the existence of God. How has the human mind changed, and how has the human psychology changed? This is a meta question, okay, in the sense that we are asking, we're not only debating, is there good evidence for God? We're debating the human mind and epistemology, and how the mind understands the world, how the mind understands reality. And you have to, whenever you debate, is there good evidence for God, or does God exist, or Islam, or Islam versus atheism, you have to take it to this meta level. You have to address the fact that the modern psychology is not inclined to, is not, is going to find atheistic arguments more compelling than they really are. The cards are stacked against the theistic position. You have to address this. And this is more of an epistemological meta question. If you run through a contingency argument, or you run through Kalam cosmological argument, or you run through the design argument, or whatever argument that you want to present, it's not going to be it's not going to click. It's not going to be as compelling or convincing to people today than it would have been a generation ago, 2 generations ago, 1,000 years ago. It's not going to be as compelling. Why? Because the psychology has changed. It has shifted. This is the kind of meta debate that needs to happen.
Intuitions. Intuitions are mostly unconscious, and they're based on the feeling of compellingness rather than systematic proof. For example, people have the intuition that harming others for no reason is wrong. This is an intuition because people might not even have articulated this as a concrete belief, and they have no logical justification for it, but they still strongly tend to accept it as true. Psychologists have shown that all children naturally develop this moral intuition earlier in life. Beyond moral intuitions, there's also aesthetic intuitions. Humans universally experience disgust at the thought of eating human flesh. There are also logical intuitions. We all intuitively accept the law of non contradiction, that two contradictory statements cannot both be true at the same time. And we also have mathematical intuitions, like 5 objects is more than 1 object. There are also intuitions about the world and history. For example, we all intuitively believe that there's an external world that persists, even if we're not in it. We also intuitively believe that the past was real, and our memories are based on that past reality. We also
So, intuitions, like, this is something that a lot of people have difficulty understanding, and it's because people think that intuitions are just, whatever you imagine, whatever an individual person imagines to be the case. Those are equivalent to what intuitions are. But this is a misunderstanding of what intuitions are. Intuitions aren't delusions. And the problem is that people have this idea that the mind and what you think is infinitely malleable. Like, you can think anything. You can imagine anything. The mind is infinitely flexible. This is wrong. This is completely wrong. The mind is not infinitely flexible. The human mind has a structure, and it has rules that it has to obey. This is a hard concept for people to grasp, but you can experience it yourself. For example, I can ask you, Imagine a square circle. Imagine a triangular sphere. Imagine it right now. Imagine a square circle, a two-dimensional circle that is a square-like, or a two-dimensional square that is circle-like. Imagine it. If your mind were infinitely malleable, you could do that. You could, why not? What's stopping you? What is stopping you from imagining a square circle, for example? Or imagine I'm showing you, here are two fingers, here are two fingers, and I combine them. Just see 5 fingers. These are 5 fingers. These are 5 fingers. Can you see that? Can you accept it? I'm not saying imagine that I'm holding a third finger. Just accept that this is 5. Accept that these are 5 fingers I'm holding up. Can you accept it and truly believe that? No, your mind has limits. Now, if I tell you to imagine a pink elephant, you can do that. Imagine a pink elephant. That's not very difficult to do. But there are other things that you can't imagine, or it's very difficult to imagine. It might not be impossible, but it's difficult, or you would never have thought of it if someone hadn't brought it up, for example. So the mind is not infinitely malleable. It's not infinitely flexible. You can't just imagine whatever you want. There are rules and there are limits. I can say, imagine that there is a bachelor who is actually married. Imagine that. A bachelor who is actually married. Can you imagine that? You can't. You can't. Why can't you? Why can't you imagine it? These are limits. So these are mental. You have certain intuitions. Some intuitions, you just can't have any doubt in them, or it's very, very difficult to doubt them. Other intuitions are easier to doubt. Other intuitions are easier to doubt, and you can poke holes in them. But the point is that these intuitions are not just delusions, or they're not equivalent to delusions, or they're not equivalent to, just whatever you think up. These are things that your mind is inclined to naturally, by nature, by virtue of what the mind is, by virtue of what the human mental faculty and cognition is. And this is something that's studied. This is studied in psychology. If the mind was a free-for-all, like just a complete blank slate, and you can imagine anything that you want, there couldn't be a field like psychology, because there are no rules, there are no consistency. Each person is going to be different than the other. Each person, in one person, certain statements or actions or behaviors, that's an indication of schizophrenia. But in another person, we can't make that inference, because there's no connection between that person's mind and another person's mind. There's no consistency. There's no shared properties. It's just two independent minds. So if one person shows, one person talks to himself and, acts very in this kind of psychotic way and harms himself and lashes out violently, well, that indicates one thing for that person, but that has no connection to another person who behaves in the same exact way. We don't know if that person is suffering from psychosis as well, or schizophrenia, or antisocial behavior. We can't make that inference, because those two minds are independent. Why should we assume that they have some kind of shared structure or shared pattern of operation? We can't assume that. They're separate people. No, psychology, the entire field of psychology, is premised on the idea that there is a shared mental apparatus. There are shared ways that the human mind works. That's how it can be a field of study. Cognitive science, another field of studying the mind. It's on the basis that there are these objective facts about the way that we think, the way that we understand the world, the way that we understand reality. So epistemology as a field is extremely concerned with these facts about human cognition. The mind is not infinitely malleable. We are not a blank slate. It's been established definitively, like the idea that we are just blank slates, this tabula rasa that the empiricists claimed, that we are just blank slates. We are born as blank slates, and it is culture, it is our parents that form our minds and form the way that we think and what we value, and that's the way that humans have the beliefs that they do, the culture that they do. It's something imposed. Otherwise, as human beings, we're born as a tabula rasa, a blank slate, and there are infinite ways that you can condition children, and you can use this kind of operant conditioning, like BF Skinner claimed that you can use conditioning to raise children in any way that you want, with any kind of attitude that you want. You want to raise children who believe that they're space aliens floating in the ether. You can do that. If you condition them in the proper way, you can do that. If you want to create children who they think of themselves as tigers and leopards, and they behave in that way, not as human children, you can do that, because the mind is a blank slate. You can condition them to any kind of behavior, any kind of a lifestyle. But this has been completely debunked. Like this kind of empiricist, blank slate, behaviorism from Skinner, it's been completely refuted within the academic fields, within psychology, within philosophy, even within cognitive science, because it's been discovered that no, actually, the mind has a structure. The mind has a structure, and we're born with it. We're born with that structure. It's not a blank slate. This is also Muslim scholars and philosophers have also discussed this, and this is what someone like Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, was primarily concerned with. He was primarily concerned, if you look at the writings of Shaykh al-Islam, he is primarily concerned with this question of epistemology and meta-epistemology, in the sense that what is the human mind? And how does the human mind operate? Are the assumptions of the Greek philosophers and the Greek logicians, their assumptions of human reasoning, are those correct? Are those assumptions correct, or have they just brought in certain assumptions and certain ideas that are not natural to actual reason and cognition of human beings? That is primarily what Shaykh al-Islam is concerned with. And he says that, well, we cannot talk about epistemology, and we cannot understand the human mind without understanding the fitrah. And the idea of the fitrah is analogous to and connected and related to this concept. Arguably, it's synonymous with this concept of intuition, natural intuition. Because the cognitive science has proven, as we'll go into that right now, that there are this kind of intuition in there being a supernatural, that there is a God, that there is a creator, and that God has created the world with a purpose. This has been proven to be natural, biological, inborn, or at least it's developed, naturally over time. So all of this, Shaykh al-Islam is very concerned with. Muslim scholars have been very concerned with, because it cuts to the core of our understanding of reality.
Also have natural intuitions about God. Most people in the world and in history believe in spirit beings. According to cognitive science, this belief is biologically rooted. Research shows that children as young as 5 across diverse cultures all express similar beliefs that the universe was created by the supernatural. This is the case even for children in cultures that don't affirm a creator God, like Japanese children. This shows that the intuition to believe that the universe was created by supernatural beings is inbuilt. People also naturally believe that the mind persists after bodily death. Belief in the afterlife is a biologically rooted intuition. Psychologists call this natural theology. So, to recap, humans have many natural intuitions about what is true. When we rely on those intuitions, that is called intuitive thinking. A good way to think about intuitive thinking is like a tendency to find something plausible or true. If I tell you the world doesn't go away when you close your eyes, most people will tend to believe me, even if I don't present some elaborate argument. The idea just has this inherent plausibility because of our human psychology. Now, there's another mode of thinking which is called analytic thinking. Analytic thinking is different because it causes us to question our intuitions rather than just accept things because they feel compelling. We demand further evidence and justification. In other words, analytic thinking is about doubt. We doubt our intuitions and then we explore other possibilities. We gather evidence, we make inferences. We might intuitively feel that eating human flesh is disgusting, but is it actually wrong? Well, let's just gather data and evaluate arguments for each side. This is analytic thinking overcoming intuitive thinking. Both intuitive and analytic thinking are found in human beings, but they're balanced in different ways in different societies. Research shows that intuitive thinking is dominant in some societies and analytic thinking is dominant in others. The other important thing is that when you engage in more analytic thinking, you start doubting more and more of your intuitions. This is studied in dual process theory. People who have maximized their analytic thinking will doubt their religious, moral, and aesthetic intuitions. Only their strongest intuitions remain. For example, their intuitions about logic or about the external world. But
So the intuitions, so there's going to be these intuitions that humans have. They're moral intuitions, like harming someone for no reason is wrong. There are other intuitions that people have universally. Like if you are someone who causes injustice, or people who or cause injustice in the world, they will be punished. Like something will happen to them to punish them for their unjust behavior. And if you are someone who does something good, then you will be rewarded, like the universe or karma, or there's some force basically that will reward you for good that you do. So this is an intuition that people have, and then different cultures will express that in different ways. But the intuition itself is a supernatural one. It's a supernatural one because on a materialistic worldview, if whatever you as an individual do, uh, good or bad, like that's not going to affect the universe. That's not going to. There's not going to be any kind of force that will punish you or reward you for that. So it's supernatural. Belief in an afterlife, that the human consciousness will continue after death. This is a universal human intuition. The belief in spirit beings, the intuition that there's consciousness that can exist outside of the body, outside of a bodily form. This is something that is intuitive. It is universal. So these are intuitions in the same way that the law of non-contradiction is an intuition that's universal. Certain mathematical intuitions like numbers, like basic arithmetic, basic arithmetic operations. These are intuitive. The belief in the external world, like people naturally believe that, yeah, there's a world that we're living in. And if we close our eyes, that world will continue to exist, even if our eyes are closed or even if we're not present in that location. Just because I leave a room doesn't mean that the room will disappear. That our memories are accurate. Our memories, like, yeah, I remember when I was 10 years old and I was playing basketball with my friends. I remember that really happened. That these are all intuitions that or tendencies that we have to find something plausible, and we feel it. But I mean, feeling sometimes makes people think that, oh, this is something subjective, like, oh, you feel cold and someone else feels hot. It's not. It's a feeling in that it's internal to you, but it's not something subjective. It's not something subjective. Again, like you can imagine very easily that, like, for example, you prefer chocolate ice cream. You can imagine, well, I could imagine liking strawberry. I could imagine liking vanilla more. I don't, but I can imagine it. That's just how I feel now. Maybe I'll change my feelings later. That's what subjective feelings are, but not all of your thoughts are subjective in that kind of way. Not all of the things that you feel are subjective in that way. And That includes, memories, basic laws of logic, basic laws of arithmetic, basic moral truths, other kinds of religious types of intuitions that you have. They're not subjective in the same way. And this is the point that many people have a hard time grasping, because there's been this kind of empiricist propaganda through the university systems, through the schooling systems, and it has made people into subjectivists. Like, everything is subjective. Everything is subjective. The mind is a blank slate. All of our thoughts are just a product of our culture, or our parents indoctrinating us, or our school system indoctrinating us. Everything is a product of that. This is completely false. So I'm also describing dual process theory. You can see the work of Jonathan Evans. He's the main figure, but there's a lot of papers he's co-written, books he's co-written on the topic of dual process theory, because you have this intuitive type of thinking and analytic thinking. Now, the thing is that these things are not, it's not like either or. There has to be a balance. There has to be a balance, because pure intuitive thinking is not good either. Pure intuitive thinking is not good, because sometimes intuitions are actually false. Sometimes you have a tendency to think in a certain way that is actually false. And I'll give you an example of that. And the famous example is the bat and ball example. So if I tell you that there is a bat and a ball that I went and bought at the store, like a baseball bat, or like in cricket, you have a bat, right? You have a bat and you have a ball that you've bought, and I buy them. The total cost is $1.10. And I tell you that's the total, $1.10. I tell you that the bat cost $1 more than the ball. So what is the cost of what was the individual cost of the bat, and what was the individual cost of the ball? That in total, both of them are $1.10. But individually, what is the cost of them when the bat is $1 more than the ball? Put your answer in the chat, like just intuitively. How much do the bat and ball cost? Hey, James, Modern Day Debates is in the chat. Good to see you. Someone is putting formulas. That's not intuitive thinking. Just what intuitively? Okay, yeah. So this is, the ball is 10 cents, the bat is $1. Yeah, dollar bat, 10 cents ball. Ball is 10 cents. Okay, 10 cents for the ball. Okay, so this is the intuitive response. This is what your mind immediately goes to. The bat is $1 and the ball is 10 cents. So together, the price for both is $1.10. But if you think about it a little bit more, you realize that this can't be the case, right? Because the whole scenario was that the bat costs $1 more than the ball. So if you say 10 cents for the ball, that means the bat is only 90 cents more than the ball. Do you see? See, that's the intuition. But the actual answer is this. The bat is $1.05 and the ball is 5 cents. Because together it's $1.10, but the bat is $1 more than the ball. So that's the answer. So this is how an intuition that you have could be mistaken. So intuitions can be mistaken. But so it's it's good to reflect, it's good to think, it's good to have some level of analysis. And this is what we see in the Quran. Because Allah, some people will have this intuition that, for example, that, well, there are other spirits that exist, so we should worship them. They have the intuition that spirits exist, right? Like jinn, for example, jinn or malaika, other supernatural entities. That is an intuition that people have. So maybe they will be inclined to worship those beings. But Allah is telling you that this to reflect. How can you worship other than Allah? How can these other entities have more power and more control than Allah, who is the creator of all of them? So why are you worshiping them? Why are you worshiping creation instead of the creator? That is something that requires some kind of reflection. It requires some kind of analysis. Not very difficult analysis, but it's some analysis. So intuitions are not 100%. We should just follow our intuitions no matter what. No, some analysis, analytic thinking is necessary. There's a balance. There's a balance. And this is the idea. Or worshiping your ancestors, for example. There's an intuition that when your ancestors died, that they're not gone, their consciousness still exists. People have that intuition universally. But then are you going to go and start worshiping your ancestors like they do in different cultures, like Chinese culture, for example, or certain Hindu cultures? Are you going to do that? No, you're going to reflect. Is this something that makes sense? Instead of asking Allah, you're asking your dead ancestors. Think, reflect, use your aql, use your reason. That's analysis. That's analytic thinking. It's required. Both are required. So let's continue, and then you'll get more of an idea of what I'm talking about.
For everything else, they demand empirical evidence. But there is no empirical evidence for these things. So when you maximize analytic thinking, people become more and more inclined to a reductionist view of the world defined by scientific materialism, and anything beyond that is doubted. Now let's bring it all back. When we have a debate about good evidence for God, what are our standards? Are we trying to meet the standards of a maximally analytic mode of thinking, the type of extreme analytic thinking of atheists? Why should we? Why should we just accept that standard of evidence as opposed to a more balanced type of cognition that doesn't nuke all our natural human intuitions? What atheists will want to claim here is that we should obviously prefer the maximally analytic mode of thinking. Why? Because that's the mode of thinking that's most likely to give us the truth. But is this true? Does maximizing doubt bring us closer to the truth? Why should we believe that? I would challenge atheists to justify this. Why should we adopt such extreme epistemic standards? In reality, a psychology that balances intuitive and analytic thinking is more suitable for recognizing truth. And this is actually an insight that we find within the history of philosophy and the work of Western philosophers like Ludwig Wittgenstein. Not all of reality can be reduced to empirical data points.
So I would say that this is an insight that has occurred or reoccurred in different moments in history. It's an insight that has occurred in Western philosophy, and the figure that is primarily associated with this is Ludwig Wittgenstein, who happens to be my favorite Western philosopher. And it's also insight from Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah as well. Because if you look at what Shaykh al-Islam is bringing in his works, like Dar al-Ta'arud, al-Aql wal-Naql, when he's his book on the refutation of the contradiction between reason and revelation, this is the point that he brings, is that you have to have a balance between reason and what is what is revelation. There cannot be a conflict. There can't be a contradiction between reason and revelation. And that epistemology is ultimately grounded in the fitrah, which is your intuition or intuitive thinking. So Shaykh al-Islam is also concerned with this. He's saying that The Falasifa and the later Asha'ira, they have gone too far in analysis, in their analytic thinking, and they've adopted this kind of Greek logic that is now it is creating a situation where revelation is being denied, and it is basically distorting the correct understanding of revelation because they have taken analysis too far. Basically, this is basically what he is complaining about. And we need to have this balance. We need to have this balance and ground ourselves in the ultimate source of our understanding, our knowledge of reality, which is the fitrah. And the fitrah, as we know, is what Allah has created human beings with, the capacity or the tendency to recognize that you are the creation, that you are created by Allah, and Allah is the creator. Alastu bi rabbikum? Am I not your Lord? Allah asked all of humanity when He created them, and He spread them, as mentioned in the Quran, that Allah created all of humanity and asked them, Alastu bi rabbikum? Qalu bala. They all said, yes, indeed. That is the source of the fitrah, because we all witnessed Allah and we all testified that Allah exists, and that is inbuilt. The memory of that, or the experience of that, is inbuilt into our cognition, into our bodies, into our very existence. That is the fitrah that's referred to in the Quran, and it's also referred to in Hadith. And Shaykh al-Islam is very concerned with the fitrah, grounding our epistemology in the fitrah. And he'll also talk about our aql, like even the aql, even our faculties of reason ultimately have a fitri basis, are actually based in the fitrah. So, and this is actually very interesting, because if you look at deduction, like the if any kind of inference or argument that you make, any kind of deductive, like a contingency argument or a kalam cosmological argument, what is it that makes an argument compelling? What is it that when you hear like the cosmological argument for the existence of God, like what is it inside of you that when you hear the argument, you say, I'm convinced, or I'm not convinced? It's a certain kind of feeling that you get. But again, when we say feeling, we don't mean a subjective feeling. We mean there's something internal that clicks or doesn't click. Like there's something. Or, any type of syllogism that you want to run. There's something like that deduction or induction, inductive reasoning or abductive reasoning, or any type of reasoning. Like there's something that moves you to accept a conclusion based on premises. That what is like that feeling is also intuitive, like your inferential intuitions that you have. So even like analytic thinking, like the ultimate nuts and bolts of it, goes back to intuitions as well. Be that as it may, the point is that you have this balance between intuitive thinking and analytic thinking, and that's how you can really understand reality. Your epistemology has to be balanced. The human mind has to be balanced. Otherwise, it's going to distort reality. It's going to come to false conclusions. So let's answer, before we move on, any super chats. From Brother Muhammad, Jazakallah khair, brother, says, keep up the good work. What about the intuition that all children about the geocentric solar system model? The sun moves, not Earth rotating around the sun. How do we respond to that? Is that even an intuition? It could be an intuition that children have, but like I said, not all intuitions are accurate. Not all intuitions are correct, like the bat and ball intuition that we described. Not all intuitions are correct. When you reflect on certain intuitions or you investigate, you can find that an intuition is invalid, or you find that, oh, well, this is actually incorrect. The earth is not stationary, for example, or the earth is not flat, for example. So no one is saying that intuitions are infallible, but there are levels. There are levels of certainty. So, like, on certain intuitions that you have, it just takes a second to think about it and you realize that, oh, this is wrong. Other intuitions, it's impossible. You cannot think, that they're not true. Like I mentioned, like, look, 2 fingers and 2 fingers, these are actually 5. Or imagine a bachelor who is not married. Like, you can't, no matter how much you reflect, you really cannot see how that intuition is wrong. And the belief in God is also the intuition that God exists, that there's a creator. It's not at that level of like the basic logic, but it's still a very strong intuition that people have. Can it be doubted? Yes, of course, it can be doubted. A lot of things can be doubted. You can doubt the external world. You can doubt that the external world exists. Actually, I'm just a brain in a vat. And actually, this is all a dream. There is no external world. You can doubt the external world. You can doubt your memories. You can say that, well, do I really know that there has been a history? Maybe the entire history and all these memories that I have are just a figment of the imagination that has popped into my head right now, or it's been implanted by aliens. You can doubt all these things. You can doubt all of these intuitions, but it's very difficult, or it doesn't naturally. People don't come to these types of conclusions unless they're in a philosophy class like Philosophy 101. So, or like, is it, is eating human flesh disgusting? Or is it tasty and wonderful and beautiful to eat someone else's flesh? So you can doubt them. You can doubt them, but humans are just not inclined. It's not plausible. Like, I can't see how eating human flesh could be appetizing or morally justified or anything other than disgusting and vile. Same with harming someone, like certain moral intuitions. Like, oh, yeah, there's nothing wrong with just slapping a baby for no reason. Nothing wrong with that. It's hard to imagine that could be the case, that there's nothing wrong with slapping a baby for no reason. These are moral intuitions. You can doubt them. You can. And that's why you have people who they suffer from psychosis or they're psychopaths. They don't have the same moral intuitions that normal people have, right? They don't have the same intuitions that normal people have. That's why the psychopath has no problem killing, causing harm, being sadists, like making people suffer. They don't see anything wrong with it. They can't understand, like, they don't have that intuition, or they've had it, but it's been corrupted. Just like the fitra can be corrupted. And that's the way that we should really understand atheists. Like, we should understand atheists as they are missing, or they have corrupted a very strong intuition that the vast majority of human beings have. And I cited this, like, in the actual debate. 90% of people in the world believe in a creator God. Even in religions like Buddhism, where they don't have a concept of a creator God. In Buddhism, there's just a belief that the universe has existed timelessly. But even Buddhists, a large percentage of them, like 40% or to 60%, believe that there's a creator God. So this is a huge percentage of the population, 80 to 90%. It's not like one survey. You have to look at a compilation of different, very respectable academic surveys, like the World Value Survey, etc., which I cite in one of these slides. But that's the level of this intuition about how common it is. It's not something that you can say, oh, this is just some people are hallucinating, or they're delusional, or every culture conspired to teach this belief. No, it's something that's inbuilt. And that's why in cognitive science, they say, like Paul Bloom says, this is natural theology. We have to study natural theology, people's natural belief in God, in spirit beings, in life after death, in all of this, all of these concepts, the theological supernatural concepts. So any questions? Let me just pause here and address some questions. So if you had a question, I missed it in the chat, just add your questions now. I want to address your questions. Yeah, a lot of unrelated. When Destiny and Cosmic Skeptic had a conversation, both atheists, they agreed that intuition can ground their egotistical prescriptions for a human society that they want to live in. Yeah, it all goes back to the structure of the mind and certain objective facts about the mind. We call it intuition, we can call it fitra. James Harden is in the chat, taking time out of his busy NBA schedule to ask a question. How is natural theology studied if the fitra has been corrupted? That's like asking, how can you study the environment when there's pollution in the environment? So, how to differentiate between intuition and fideism? Fideism is the idea that, well, we just accept things without reason. So we just accept things and God has commanded it. Therefore, reason should not get involved. We should not think rationally about these things. We just accept them. So I've been teaching against fideism for a long time. Fideism is the Quran commands us to use our aql, to use our reason. And when we do that, we see that so much of Islam is rational and wise. And the only reason that people today and some Muslims today will appeal to fideism and say, oh, don't think about it, we don't use reason, is they assume a modern atheistic psychology. They assume a modern atheistic psychology. And if you assume that psychology, then basic human facts are not reasonable or are not rational. And that's the whole point. Like, we have to get rid of that mentality. We have to call out this modern atheistic psychology and so-called rationality. And we have to redefine and reconstitute and reassert a natural human rationality that properly balances intuitive and analytic thinking. That's the whole point of this part of the debate, or actually the whole debate, actually. But like I said, intuition, my claim is not we accept whatever intuitions that we have without question. No, we have to also use analytic thinking. It just has to be balanced. Yeah. So if the intuition is wrong, then you have a faculty of reason that Allah has given you. Again, there's a balance. There's a balance between intuitive thinking and analytic thinking. I'm not advocating 100% intuitive thinking. Daniel, do not many Muslim scholars talk about using reason and rationality to first accept God? Yeah, that's what some Muslim scholars will talk about. But how can you trust your reason and rationality? What is reason and rationality based in? Like, this is the same kind of problem that Dillahunty has. Like, Dillahunty wants to talk about, well, is there good evidence for God? He's basically asking, like, is it rational to believe in God? Is it rational to believe in God? And what we have to ask him back is, well, what is your definition of rationality? What is human rationality? What constitutes human rationality? We have to ask that question first. That's what Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah does. And this is also, this is, like I said, different moments in history, in different civilizations, you had this insight. I didn't go into Ludwig Wittgenstein, but he had the same insight. Ludwig Wittgenstein is a very interesting philosopher in Western philosophy. He had this book called the Tractatus. He basically wanted to end philosophy. He said philosophy is a waste of time because it's not systematic and it's not logical. If we approach it in a logical, systematic way, we can end philosophy because we can solve every problem through a logical, systematic study. And his book, the Tractatus, was an attempt to do this. But then he realized after he had written that book, his Tractatus became a major success. People were very impressed by that. It had a big impact on analytic philosophy of the time. Analytic philosophy is like philosophy in America and the UK. But it was very successful, and it forwarded this empiricist philosophy of that time. Like, everything, knowledge needs to be based on science and scientific facts that we can verify. This was empiricism and the positivist philosophical movement. But then Wittgenstein destroyed that same movement that he had strengthened with his work. He destroyed it in what's called his later philosophy, and he published another book, Philosophical Investigations. Amazing book, Philosophical Investigations. And what is the point of Philosophical Investigations is that, well, it has many themes, but one of the main themes is that when you're doing this type of abstract philosophy, like you're treating philosophy like a bunch of equations and analysis, like maximum level of analytic thinking and scientific thinking, you lose a big component of reality. You have strayed from the domain of reality. Because, so how does he explain this, or how can this be understood? Reality, we talk about reality in a kind of ordinary language. Like, we have this ordinary language when we talk to our friends, our family, our coworkers, our colleagues. We have a certain ordinary language, and that's what life is about. Like, when you think about life, you think about yourself, you think about your future, you think about what you love, what you hate, what you enjoy doing. Your whole thinking is based on a type of ordinary language, ordinary concepts, everyday common sense concepts. That's what life is about. And that's how you understand reality. That's how you're plugged into reality. There's no reality outside of your own experience of it. And that experience is modulated or mediated through this ordinary language that we learn. Now, what happens in philosophy is that you generalize and you start to abstract. You start to do analysis. You start to do, you build a theory, you build a model to, your theory of knowledge, your theory of beauty, your theory of justice, your theory of, perception. You build these theories, then other academics, other philosophers come and they build on your theory, and they further generalize, they further abstract, they further analyze, and then more and more abstract theories are developed. They become more abstract, they become more general, the language becomes more arcane. And to study these works, to even understand some of these works, you have to go into do a graduate work. You have to go do a PhD. You have to study. And if you bring one of these graduate level books and have just an average person try to read them, they won't understand a word. They won't really understand what is happening. Like, what does this even mean? I can't understand a sentence of it. Even it's in plain English, but I just can't understand it. It's just too abstract. And the insight here is that, well, once the language has become so abstract and what's being discussed is so arcane, you have lost touch with the main thing that allows you to understand reality in the first place, which is your language. So this level of academic sophistication and nuance and abstraction and analysis hasn't helped you learn more about reality. It has taken you further and further away from reality. This is the insight that Wittgenstein has, and it started its own philosophical movement in and of itself, which is ordinary language philosophy. Ordinary language philosophy, which was very influential in the 20th century, and it's very interesting. It's like a meta critique of philosophy, and I find a lot of parallels between Wittgensteinian critique of philosophy and a Taymiyan, from Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, critique of Kalam. I find a lot of parallels in this, and I believe like this kind of insight is very instructive. Is very instructive to understand atheism, to understand the source of doubts, and to understand like human knowledge and its ability to grasp reality of God, reality of the world around us, reality of creation, etc. So there are more examples I'll give you, inshallah, but let's continue.
Scrutinized through systematic analysis. The reality we all experience is far richer than that. And insisting on maximum analytic thinking actually takes us further from full.
Look at Dillahunty's face. He's like, where are the scientific studies? Where are the telescope images and the scans from the microscopes? I'm not hearing any science here. That's what's going through his head at this moment.
Fully seeing reality, like covering up one half of our binoculars. Furthermore, the insistence on maximal analytic thinking is nothing more than a recent product of cultural evolution. For most of history, human cognition was more balanced. So what changed? Analytic thinking became dominant not because it's more attuned to the truth or because it's more beneficial for humanity. Analytic extremism became dominant because of what we can call cognitive colonialism. To understand how this happened, consider society A, that is analytic dominant, versus society B, that is intuitive dominant. Over time, both societies experience technological and economic growth, but society A experiences this faster. This allows society A to dominate society B. Society A then imposes analytic thinking on its newly acquired subjects by establishing an analytic-focused school system. In this way, analytic thinking spreads and dominates more and more societies until it dominates the entire globe. The societies with the most extreme emphasis on analytic thinking win out. That's modern history in a nutshell. Researchers like Joseph Heinrich have explained this history in books like The Secret of Our Success. Now, the fact that analytic thinking can accelerate technology and growth, that sounds like a great thing. But the big question is, just because analytic thinking excels at producing technology, does that mean that maximizing it is better suited to determine truth? I'm not.
So this so what the atheists will want to say is that we want a society with more analytic thinking. And why is that? Because analytic thinking is just more compelling. And the point that I'm making is that, well, analytic thinking, when it's taken to the extreme, actually distorts reality. It takes you away from reality. You get less knowledgeable about the world that you live in when you have a purely analytic way of thinking. Because when you have this kind of extreme analytic thinking, you doubt all your intuitions. You have to doubt the external world. You have to doubt your memories. You have to doubt morality. You have to doubt arithmetic. You like Aaron Ra in Jake's debate. Aaron Ra was doubting that 2 + 2 = 4. So you are becoming more and more unhinged from reality because it's easy to say, I doubt everything. I doubt everything. Nothing that you tell me, I will not doubt. Or everything that you tell me, I'm going to doubt. Like that's the extreme analytic mentality. That kind of person is unhinged. That kind of person is unhinged and is out of touch with the reality that the rest of us experience. So how could such a mind be taken as exemplary or as a model of what is truth on the question of God or religion or anything else? Why should we take that psychology as the standard? And the point that these atheists will not acknowledge and fail to appreciate is that the mentality of analysis, why people are more analytic today, is not because analytic thinking is more in tune with reality. Analytic thinking is just better at producing the kinds of weapons that lead to military domination. It creates technology that leads to economic growth that allows your country or your society to dominate others. That's a fact. And so if you have this kind of cultural evolution understanding of societies dominating each other, then the society that has more analytic thinking will beat societies that have less analytic thinking, because the ones that have more analytic thinking are going to have the better weapons. They're going to have the more money to have weapons to fight than the more intuitive societies. So this will just create a situation where societies are battling over time, and then the societies that come out on top after 100 years, 200 years, 300 years are the ones that are the most analytic. The ones that are the most analytic and are the ones that are most skeptical. And this is continuing to this day. The societies that are most atheistic, like look at China, for example. China is extremely atheistic society. And they have this active war against religion. Their GDP continues to rise. The amount of technology that they have is increasing. And you can go back to the Aaron Ra debate to look at the social implications of atheism, because if you don't really believe in certain kinds of intuitive truths like the sanctity of the human body, you'll be willing to do genetic experiments on the human body and create these designer babies, or try to genetically engineer super soldiers and do those kinds of experiments on children. And you'll have less of a hesitation or a kind of avoidance or aversion to doing that kind of experimental work, because you're less intuitive, you're more analytical. That makes you, into this kind of psychopath. But if you have a whole society like that, then your technology, you're going to develop all kinds of new genetic engineering methodologies. Your society will advance from a purely technological perspective. Like there's less holding you back from doing that kind of thing that normal people find disturbing and immoral, objectionable. Like, don't experiment on babies. Don't do these genetic experiments. You are changing the creation of Allah. You're changing the creation of God. For Christians, man was made in the image of God, and you are trying to distort that. So Christians are also, like traditional Christians, are very opposed to this type of genetic engineering. But if you have a more atheistic society, they're more open to it. They don't have those same intuitions because they're more analytical. So the Chinese, they create these super soldiers, they create these super weapons, and they're able to overtake America, or the more religious societies that were not willing to experiment in that kind of way. So this is you can call it cultural evolution. We're not talking about Darwinism. We're talking about cultural evolution over time. Those societies that have more analytic ability will develop more technologies. Got to clean up the chat. Yeah, look at how they're treating our Uyghur brothers and sisters. May Allah free our brothers and sisters from these oppressors. Ameen.
Claiming that analytic thinking has no connection to the truth. But again, when you maximize this type of thinking, that means that your analytic capacities start overshadowing intuitions about the world that are also very compelling. Throughout history, all peoples felt intuitively that there were moral, aesthetic, and religious truths about life and purpose, and many of these truths were based on intuitions that were universally shared by all humanity. Now, if you told all these people that they have to reject their intuitions and adopt analytic extremism, which ultimately will bring into doubt all these other intuitions, most people would not accept that. But unfortunately, people don't have a choice. The analytic mode of cognition has been imposed by cognitive colonialism. Secular humanist powers have implemented all manner of social and educational programs over the course of the past 300 years to champion analytic thinking. Why? Because that's the type of thinking that maximizes economic growth. The more people are thinking analytically, the more they produce science and technology, which will increase GDP. Atheists want to tell the story that the debate between atheism and religion is about two sides making arguments against each other, and people decide which is more compelling. But there's another way to look at it. Atheists represent an extremist mode of thinking that results in maximizing GDP and military power. The reason that there are so many atheists today is not because the scientific worldview is inherently compelling. Rather, maximizing analytic thinking allows you to invent nukes and tanks. Most people historically disagreed with maximal analytic thinking, but they were wiped out. Social, technological, economic violence has changed the epistemology of people across the world. Prior to this, no one would have taken atheism seriously, but atheists fail to acknowledge this history. They just assume that analytic thinking should be maximized no matter what. This biases any debate on the existence of God. The theist is always at a disadvantage if he has to mold his arguments to satisfy a mind that's primed to reject anything non-empirical. Humans have
Yeah, so someone is asking, how does analytic thinking enhance GDP? Well, analytic thinking lends itself to scientific thinking. Like, you're going to be able to do science, you're able to do more systematic thinking academically, and the more analytic that you are, the more that this is possible. The more that society is analytic, the more that society is able to do science, able to invent new technologies, invent technologies that can even disrupt human life, but it's all considered worth it as long as it benefits you as an individual. Intuitions that concern the value of marriage, the value of family, the value of community, the value of belief in God and worshiping God, those are all based on intuitive thinking. But the more analytic society becomes, those values are less important. They're de-emphasized, or they're completely annihilated. So those are the kinds of things that will prevent technology. Simple example. If you have women who are going to stay home to maintain their marriage, to maintain their family, to raise their kids, like that's the natural intuition that mothers have. That's the natural intuition that fathers have for their wives. But if people have less of that intuition, like less of that motherly instinct, they'll be more inclined, or it'll be easier to get them in the university, going into jobs, working for technology, working for science, trying to increase the GDP of a country. So increasing analytic thinking and decreasing intuitive thinking in society has a direct correlation to GDP. The question is the GDP, the GDP of a country, the end all be all of society? And it's a very simple answer. Like, would we prefer a more religious society that has a lower GDP, or a society with a higher GDP but complete godlessness and all of this corruption, all of this degeneracy? Just, it's impossible to get married. It's impossible to stay married. You have no concept of a real stable family. Like, these are the things that I point out. Like, this is what is happening to the world. This is what happening to not only Western countries but also Muslim countries. It's connected directly to this pursuit of maximum technology, maximum individual pleasure, maximum freedom. This is what liberalism is. Liberalism is not just about freedom and equality as values. It's also about how technology furthers that goal of maximizing freedom and equality, because you can invent all of these consumer goods that make life more pleasurable for you as an individual. That requires technology that will increase the GDP, etc. So these are all themes that we've discussed in all of the debates. Why not religious with higher GDP? It's because it's a zero-sum game. You can't just maximize everything. You can't maximize analytic thinking and intuitive thinking. They come at a cost. So you have to balance it. But that balance, so that's the answer to that.
Strong natural intuitions about reality. We have the intuition that there's an external world, that our memories have truth content. There are intuitions that don't give us any more power to do science or produce technology, but that doesn't make them unreal. Intuitions about the existence of God are among the strongest intuitions humans have, and this intuition is supported by inferential reasoning and communal traditions. If an atheist says he doesn't find these things compelling, we should ask, where do you get your epistemic standards from? Why shouldn't we believe that those standards are unique to modern Western culture and have only emerged very recently in history, primarily because they maximize GDP? Why should we take those standards as arbiters of truth about God or anything else? We'll now jump into the open.
Okay, so that's the opening argument. So as you can see, like, this is an argument about our standards of evidence and what kind of psychology is involved with evaluating the question: does God exist? Is there good evidence for God? Is it rational to believe in God? Is it reasonable to believe in God? You have to go back to the question of psychology, the question of the human mind and how the human mind understands reality, because God is the greatest reality. Allah is the greatest reality. And how he is known to us is a question, can be corrupted. Basically, our epistemic faculties can be corrupted. And so how does that happen? Why does that happen? Is there evidence to show that this is happening? That's what the presentation is about. And it was only a 10-minute opening. I had to fit in a lot of arguments and information in a short amount of time. So I just want to elaborate it for everyone. So we have some more super chats that I will read, inshallah, from Famo. Says, mashallah, Brother Daniel, this clearly was a victorious debate. You were nonchalantly obliterating Matt with pure intellect, and he was screaming like a buffoon. Everyone knows during a debate, if a person has to resort to cussing and insulting, that they've lost. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless and preserve you, brother. Jazakallah khair for your super chat and kind words. Raza says, respect your hard work. Jazakallah khair for representing Islam in such a non-apologetic way. I just hope that you can be a little less harsh, if possible, with other Muslim brothers, even if they are harsh with you, such as the Madkhalis. May Allah bless you and your family. Am I harsh? I think I'm just a jovial guy. Muhammad, Jazakallah khair for your super chat, says, Arn Ra stated that quantum physics disproves law of non-contradiction and 2 + 2 can equal 5 in higher maths. This is rubbish because a particle in A and B doesn't mean it's in position A and not in A, because not A is a logical function, LOL, and 2 + 2 can equals 5 without presupposing real numbers, LOL. Yeah, Arn Ra is an idiot. He doesn't understand what he was even saying. Like, some mathematician was probably talking about non-standard set theory, and yeah, there's weird stuff that can happen in non-standard set theory, but when we're talking about 2 + 2 = 4, that's in standard set theory. So assuming standard set theory, 2 + 2 cannot equal 5. It's logically impossible. Therefore, it's a necessary truth that 2 + 2 = 4. But Arn Ra doesn't know much about set theory, math, or physics, frankly. Yeah, quantum physics, like, yeah, you can have a superposition of states. You can have a superposition, like, of particle spin. And that doesn't mean, so it depends on your interpretation of quantum mechanics. If you have, like, this Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics, then the particle is not really in state A, like an up or down state. It's neither and both at the same time. But that's just one interpretation of quantum physics. There are other, it's not, the math actually doesn't violate the principle of non-contradiction. Like, quantum physics is based on standard, real numbers, real analysis. So it's not violating basic arithmetic. It's just the interpretation of what does the actual equation mean. So yeah. I don't really see. Yeah, like, here is an atheist, I assume. You're assuming that there's an objective moral standard. All morality is subjective, and therefore there might not be an epistemology that gives you what you want. Yeah, so it's like such a simplistic exercise, like, so simple. Like, just doubt everything. Like, that's what an atheist is like. Just doubts everything, and he thinks he's some kind of genius, brilliant mind. Oh, you think that it's wrong to kill babies for no reason? Well, I doubt that. Did you consider that it could possibly be right to kill babies? Ha 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 ha! I'm so intelligent. Ha ha ha! You think that there's an external world? Well, did you consider that we might be in a dream? Ha 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 ha! Take some philosophy courses, and you'll see how you can doubt everything. Oh, I'm just so smart and brilliant. Like, this is like what typical atheist is. So, and it kind of detracts from their entire life. It detracts from their entire life because, and this is what someone like Dillahunty is too much of a coward to own up to. Like, you doubt that God exists, but you doubt everything. So what? You doubt that there's an external world. You doubt that there's any kind of objective moral truths. So that's like that is the responds to atheists. Like, so what? You're doubting everything. Like, because there's so many things that are a part of reality that are not empirical, that are not material, that we recognize as truths. Even math is not something empirical or material. You cannot use a telescope to see an equation, or to see real numbers. Like, you can represent real numbers, but can you see them? See these mathematical concepts? Like, it's not empirical. So much of our reality is non-empirical, non-scientific, non-material in nature. The atheist, because of the epistemic standards that he's adopted, has to doubt all of these things. So that's it's the atheist looks absurd. The atheist looks ridiculous and absurd. What Dillahunty does in his debates is he tries to dodge this clear implication with really nonsensical answers or nonsensical responses. Because I put this point to him. I was like, well, you doubt moral truths? Like, what is the scientific basis for the moral truth that harming others is wrong? Because he doesn't want to be like this alpha guy and say, oh, it's all subjective. Like, yeah, there's no truth of the matter about, just slapping a baby for no reason. There's no objective. It's not objectively right or wrong. He doesn't want to express doubt in that because it makes him look stupid and absurd. So he has to say, oh, well, he uses all these weasel words like, oh, it's reliable. This idea that harming others for no reason is wrong, that's reliable to me, and I'm going to continue to believe it unless there's some thing that shows me that it's not reliable. Like, this type of response is what he gave. But how can the idea of slapping a baby for no reason being right, how can that be reliable? Like, we're not in the realm of reliability or investigating something. And okay, in all of history, slapping a baby for no reason was wrong and everyone recognized it as such, but now we've seen that, oh, it can actually be right. Oh, go ahead, slap the baby, it's no problem. It's a new discovery. Scientists have just discovered that there's nothing wrong with slapping a baby. We're going to publish peer-reviewed paper in Nature. New England Journal of Medicine. Did you know we did double-blind peer-reviewed double-blind studies that show slapping that baby right as rain, perfectly justified. Go ahead and slap away. Like, is that it's ridiculous. Like, that when you articulate it, like what this could actually mean. Like, what do you mean, Dillahunty? Like, what do you mean by this? It sounds really stupid, and that's what it is. It's really moronic. So that's like how he dodges the absurdity of doubting everything. Right? He dodges it in this weasel way by stating nonsense and refusing to clarify, refusing to actually explain. Very good question. What do we even mean by slap? Yeah. Morality is subjective by definition. Prove otherwise, Pikachu. Yeah, I mean it's absurd. Like, this is the absurdity. Like, logic is subjective too by definition. Like, logic, math is subjective too. It's subjective because it's non-material. It's non-material. It's non. You can't have a telescope or a microscope that will you point at something and, oh, there it is. There's the law of non-contradiction. We see it right there. So that's your definition of subjective. Subjective is anything that's non-material. So, like, see, it's hard to argue with these people because it's like arguing with someone who has like a psychological problem. Like, they don't understand what everyone else intuitively grasps. So they're psychologically deficient. Like, that's what we should understand atheism. If you go to that in the debate, like, this is a good visualization. Like, you have this dial and you want to be balanced, but the atheist is stuck like in this mode of just doubting everything. So it's a psychological problem. Okay. There's some other stuff that I wanted to show you, so give me 1 second. Yeah, so I'm not gonna play the part where he has his meltdown and starts dropping F-bombs every other word. Because it just shows, like, you can go watch it yourself on the original debate. And it showed that he was just very frustrated. He was he had nothing left to say. He couldn't respond to the arguments. He's just a very shallow person. Like, he has like, you can tell, like, with a lot of atheists, especially these popular YouTube ones, that they're very intellectually shallow. And they can't, like, think about an idea that you present and respond to it and react to it. Like, those are the best types of debates. Like, when the two people, they're really talking to each other and they're interacting and engaging with ideas. That's the best type of debate. But some people are just too stupid to be able to do that, or they're too intellectually non-curious to be able to do that. They can't understand. So they have their talking points. They have, like, their 1 or 2 arguments, and they just spam them. And they can't really go beyond that. That is all the atheists I've debated are like that. Most of the Christians, or all of the Christians actually that I've debated, are like that. It's very few people that I've debated where they actually hear the argument and they will engage with it and will have a response. So this guy was just a dumpster fire. Like, he just was going off. But look at what he chooses to attack. It's like every single debate, they want to attack this question of the age of Aisha, or the marriage age within Islam, minor marriage. That's what they want to make every single debate about. And this is something for Muslims to take note of. Like, this is what they want to keep spamming over and over and over again. Basically, when he's shouting the F word at me over there and I'm just laughing, he's cursing me out. You want to F kids, blah, blah, blah. What I'm hearing is he wants me to renounce Islam. Renounce your religion, renounce Islam, throw your religion under the bus, over and over again. That's what he's screaming. And that's what all of these people are screaming when they bring, like, that Patrick Bet David debate. When those two losers are attacking Islam, what they're saying constantly is, renounce Islam, renounce it, Renounce Islam. Throw it under the bus. Do it. Do it. Renounce Islam. Just over and over and over and over again. That's what they're shouting. Just imagine it. What you as a Muslim have to do is stay firm. Just stay firm. Just smile. Be calm. No, I'm not going to renounce Islam. Shout all you want. Drop as many F-bombs as you want. I'm not going to renounce. Okay. So it's, as a boxing analogy, it's like rope-a-dope. Like in boxing, I'm not a boxing expert, but there's this concept of rope-a-dope where the opponent just wants to go wild. He just wants to throw these haymakers at you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He's just going to tire himself out. He's going to look stupid. You just be calm. And then when he's tired himself out, he's cried his heart out. He's really, let it all out. Then you can put your arguments in place. You can say that actually, not only will I not renounce Islam, you need to renounce your degenerate worldview, your degenerate, backwards, disgusting, vile liberalism. You need to denounce. And that's how you do it. So yeah, just imagine yourself. You'll take some blows, but as soon as you say, oh, actually it's complicated. No, we don't have anything like that in Islam. And oh, that was just the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam because of the circumstances and because of that culture in that time in the 7th century. Obviously, that's not normal. That's not a real thing. Obviously. As soon as you do that, you've lost. You've lost because you're throwing the deen under the bus. Oh, we don't really have punishments for apostasy, and there's no hudud in Islam. It's just that particular context, and Islam means peace. And really, trust me, this is not what Islam is. As soon as you do that, you've lost. You're a loser in the eyes of your opponent, like these non-Muslims. You're a loser in the eyes of the ummah, and you're a loser, in terms of your commitment to Islam. You've lost. You failed the test. You failed the test. You failed the test. The test is someone comes to you and says, renounce Islam, renounce Islam, renounce Islam. Do it, do it, do it, do it. And if because you feel embarrassed or you feel like, oh, he's confronting me. Oh, I'm going to look bad. Oh, okay. Let me just quickly make up some excuse that you've lost. You've failed the test. You failed the test. All you had to do is you can shut your mouth. Just don't say anything. That is safer for you. That's better for you. Just shut your mouth. Don't say anything. But if you really want to pass the test, just say, no, I'm not going to renounce Islam. No. And just smile. That's how you rope-a-dope. ماشي. So the second part of the debate, why Islam is true. So let's go to that.
Thanks for that opening, Matt. We're going to kick it over to Daniel for his opening for this section, in particular on Islam, whether or not there's more evidence for Islam compared to other religions. Daniel, the floor is yours for 10 minutes as well. Thanks for being with us.
When we evaluate a complex system, a complex belief system, whether it be humanism, communism, Islam, Christianity, it's never a simple proof that can be provided to show that it's true. We usually look at compelling points in favor of that belief system and then look at any potential deal breakers. We weigh all the compelling points against the deal breakers in order to come to an overall conclusion about its validity. In this part of the debate, atheists have to pretend that they're open to accepting a religion. So which religion is most compelling? Atheists commonly argue that all religions are equally compelling. What they mean by this is that all religions are equally false. This is because religions make claims that cannot be proven scientifically, and it's assumed that claims which cannot be proven scientifically are not compelling. For example, the Islamic claim that one God exists is no more compelling than the claim that Zeus or Hercules exist. But this is not true. Humans naturally find certain theologies more compelling than others, and this is because of natural intuitions that all humans have. There are three natural intuitions to consider. First is what psychologists call intuitions about spirit beings. Every society in history believed in some form of spirit beings, like angels, ghosts, or gods. Brain scans reveal that such belief is associated with the prefrontal cortex. Spirit beings are conceptualized as possessing minds, but lack ordinary bodies made of matter. Because spirit beings lack material bodies, they're considered invisible or exist in a hidden realm. Because people have an intuition that spirit beings exist, they're inclined to believe in things like angels, demons, and ghosts. By contrast, people are not inclined to believe in a flying spaghetti monster. This is because a spaghetti monster has a material body. Atheists know that humans have trouble believing in such a creature, and this is why they misrepresent religious beliefs as equivalent to belief in the flying spaghetti monster. This is a straw man. Second, there are intuitions that psychologists call teleological intuitions. Studies reveal that young children believe that certain things like cars and spoons are made by human beings, but natural things like animals, plants, and the sun are not made by human beings. The interesting thing is that children believe that these natural entities were made with a purpose by non human agents like God. In other words, human intuitions support the idea that spirits or gods create natural entities like animals, rivers, and humans themselves. This idea is found in religions across the world. Third, humans have intuitions about causation. Humans find simpler causal explanations more compelling than complex causal explanations. This is Occam's razor. The ideal is causal explanations that assume only one cause. Now, when you combine these three intuitions, the result is people believe that spirit beings exist, spirit beings have created natural entities for a purpose, and ultimately there is one spirit being who has caused all things to come into existence for a purpose. This is the natural intuitive basis for belief in one supreme spirit being or creator God. In other words, monotheism. Since it's supported by so many natural intuitions, monotheism is very compelling for human beings. Surveys prove this. 80 to 90% of people endorse the belief in a singular, all powerful creator, God. What's surprising is that even 60% or more of Buddhists in the world believe in a creator God, despite the fact that Buddhism does not have this idea in its theology. The natural intuition is so strong, it even overcomes Buddhist theology. Most of the 10 to 20% of people who don't believe in a creator are actually atheists or agnostics. So the idea of an all-powerful creator is the dominant idea across all these independent religions and cultures around the world. This is due to biologically rooted human psychology. In Islamic terms, we call this the fitrah. Islam is more compelling than other religions because it centers on pure monotheism. This differentiates it from other religions, many of which also endorse the idea of a creator God, but blend it with polytheism. For example, the Christian notion of the Trinity mixes monotheism with polytheism. Another example is Judaism. Certain passages in the Hebrew Bible are strictly monotheistic, others are polytheistic. Also, Hinduism has a monotheistic strand, which holds that there is one ultimate God who reveals himself in the form of many deities like Vishnu and Shiva. Hindu texts also contain many polytheistic passages. Now, moving beyond theology.
So the Tawheed and monotheism, belief in one creator God, this is the core part of Islam, and it's also the core religious belief that people around the world, the majority of people around the world, also intuitively believe. So that's an interesting confluence. That's an interesting confluence, that the number one thing that people in the world believe in terms of religion, because there's different religious beliefs, the belief in the afterlife, belief in heaven and hell, belief in your good deeds will be rewarded, your bad deeds will be punished, belief in different religious moral claims. Those religious beliefs, they have different levels of compellingness. And how do we determine compellingness? Well, we can just say the number of people that believe it. So when it comes to belief in creator God, all-powerful God who has created the universe, that is the number one most compelling belief. That is the religious belief that is accepted by the most people in the world compared to other religious beliefs, like beliefs in prophets, beliefs in angels, belief in hell, belief in Satan, belief in the afterlife. Those are less. But belief in a creator God, that is the top belief, and also within a religion. So even if you look at Muslims, like if you survey Muslims, their belief in God is more than their belief. Like there are more Muslims who are very sure, like they're very confident in their belief in God as opposed to other beliefs. Same thing with Christians, same thing with Hindus. Like they're all like this belief in one creator God is at the top. When you look across religions and also within religions across the world. And that also is the main thing that Islam is focused on. Our theology, Tawheed, one God, no partners, as the creator of the universe. That is also the main focus within Islam. So this makes Islam, just on that basis alone, on the basis of natural religious intuitions as studied in the cognitive science of religion, that makes Islam extremely compelling right off the bat. What Daniel is saying is not true. The world used to not be monotheistic. There were thousands of gods. So, yeah, there are all these religions that are polytheistic. But even within polytheistic gods, they believe in one supreme creator God in the major religions. Okay, so Hinduism, for example, is the archetypal polytheistic religion. Even Hindus, they believe in one powerful, all-powerful creator God. And sometimes they get into polytheism, sometimes they get into henotheism, but the idea of one creator God is still there. Now, if you're talking about non-major religions and you're talking about like animism, for example, you're talking about different hunter and gatherer people, societies, then yeah, you can find a minority of them, of these hunter and gatherer societies, that they don't have this belief in one all-powerful God. They're animists, for example, or they believe in different spirit gods, or they believe like the mountains are gods and the oceans are gods and the skies are gods. These are animistic people. So those people exist. And this is also based on the intuition in spirit beings, which I covered in, right in this opening. There is an intuition in spirit beings. But again, I said we need to have a balance. There's a balance. So when people start to reflect, and when people start to think and reflect about the world, and they start to reflect on, the source of the world and the purpose of life, that kind of analysis and reflection, which is no longer becomes more analytic, then they become monotheists. Their thinking leads them to monotheism. And we see this in the history of Islam. We see that the Jahili Arabs within the Arabian Peninsula in the 7th century, they were worshiping all of these different gods. They also believed in Allah as the ultimate God, the all-powerful creator. They believed in Allah, but they associated partners with him. And the message of Islam that the Prophet ﷺ brought is a message of monotheism, that why are you associating idols and other gods with Allah? There is no other object worthy of worship except Allah, la ilaha illallah. And you reflect on that. You can think and reflect, and you will come to that conclusion. So this is the balanced type of cognition that is found in Islam. And we're not saying that all intuitions are correct and valid, and analysis has no place. All right. So the first point of the compellingness of Islam over other religions is Tawheed, is monotheism.
religions usually claim to have founders who lived in the distant past and had access to supernatural knowledge. For example, Zoroaster had access to supernatural knowledge and founded Zoroastrianism. Similarly, Moses founded Judaism, Buddha founded Buddhism, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam founded Islam, and so on. Religions further claim that they've preserved the teachings of their founders without fundamental alteration into the present. Given this claim, a religious tradition would be discredited if it's discovered that its present-day teachings cannot be traced back to its founder. This creates a problem. History shows that religions usually change significantly over time due to social, technological, and political change. This means that in most cases, a religion's core scriptures and doctrines have changed over time and cannot be traced to its founders, at least not in any historically verifiable way. For example, historical investigation demonstrates that basic Christian doctrines like the Trinity cannot be traced back to Jesus. Similarly, when it comes to figures like Zoroaster, Moses, and perhaps even Buddha, it cannot be independently verified that these figures have ever even existed. As a result, basic Zoroastrian, Jewish, and Buddhist texts or doctrines cannot be traced to these founders. But Islam is unique in that its basic scripture and doctrines can be traced back to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is something acknowledged even by non-Muslim academics. Rock inscriptions and 7th century non-Muslim sources confirm that the Prophet ﷺ actually existed. Furthermore, radiocarbon dating has demonstrated that the Quran we read today can be traced back to his lifetime. There is also no doubt that basic Islamic practices and doctrine can be traced back to the Prophet ﷺ because they're mentioned in the Quran or in inscriptions or in 7th century non-Muslim sources. Practices like ritual prayer, fasting, zakat, pilgrimage, or beliefs like belief in one God, his prophets, his angels, heaven, hell, a final day of judgment. All these core practices and doctrines can be objectively traced to the 7th century. Now, to be clear, the fact that a religion's teachings have been preserved does not, in and of itself, prove the truth of that religion. Nonetheless, if a religion's teachings have constantly changed over time, this destroys the credibility of that religion. For example, it's hard to be a Jew or a Christian once you realize that basic Jewish and Christian doctrines and rituals cannot be objectively traced back to Moses and Jesus. Of all the major religions, Islam has preserved its teachings best, and this contributes to its unique compellingness. Another critical factor, every religion ascribes amazing and miraculous acts to its founding figures. And this is because the miracles of a founder make his message more compelling. Amazing acts are evidence of support from God or supernatural forces. Now consider the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Muhammad claimed that he was God's messenger to all of mankind, that his task was to turn mankind to monotheism and to bring them God's final message. Suppose that after Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam claimed all this, he only won 2 or 3 followers and then died virtually unknown in the desert. Were this the case, his message would be far, far less compelling. But in reality, he proceeded to perform many amazing acts that can be historically verified, whether one is a Muslim or not. For example, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is widely considered the most influential man in history, even among non-Muslims. During his life, he established the foundations of a major new world religion, world civilization, and launched wars that would overthrow 2 of the 3 greatest world empires of his age. No person in history has turned more people to the monotheistic worship of God than he has. His religion is the strongest and most robust in human history and will soon have the greatest number of followers. While other religions, including Christianity, collapse before our eyes, Islam stands alone, offering the only religious alternative to atheism and secularism. Due to these amazing achievements, it's natural that people take Muhammad's message more seriously than they would otherwise. When it comes to founding figures associated with other religions, it usually cannot be established that they did anything amazing. For example, many amazing acts are attributed to Zoroaster and Moses, but these cannot be verified because their existence cannot be verified. The same is arguably true of Buddha. Jesus preached for a few years before being crucified, according to Christians. Christianity then spread across the Roman Empire, which is quite impressive, but the understanding of Christianity that spread had little to do with what can be traced to the purported teachings of Jesus. Rather, what spread were teachings of Paul, which mutated over time through a series of church councils. Finally, statistical studies show that Muslim societies across the world have the highest levels of religious belief and the strongest system of marriage and family. This is due to the Sharia, a concrete, coherent, time-tested system of rules for how to live Other religions lack such a system. For example, Christianity and Buddhism currently do not have a concrete system of rules to guide people, with the result that Christians and Buddhist populations simply take on whichever values and norms of the dominant political system. In the Roman Empire, every Christian accepts Roman imperialism. In feudal Europe, every Christian accepts European feudalism. In a liberal communist country, every Christian accepts liberalism or communism. Judaism and Hinduism do have systems of rules, but anyone who closely examines these rules sees that they're full of contradictions and have constantly changed over time. As a result, no one, including Jews and Hindus, take them seriously or apply them consistently. The Sharia is different because it does provide individuals and societies with a concrete blueprint for living a life which values religion, marriage, family, and community. All these factors make Islam the most compelling religion.
Okay, so that's the overall argument. Here are the reasons. Why is this not working?
Thank you.
Let me get that slide back.
Thank you.
Why? Annoying. I won't go back to the slide. So annoying. YouTube.
Roman imperialism. In feudal Europe, every Christian accepts European feudalism. In a liberal communist country, every Christian accepts liberalism or communism. Judaism and Hinduism do have systems of rules, but anyone who closely examines these rules sees that they're full of contradictions and have constantly changed over time. As a result, no one, including Jews and Hindus, take them seriously or apply them consistently.
Okay, there we go. So these are the 4 reasons. You can think of more reasons. Because I've taught a course on how to prove Islam is true, and there are other reasons that you can cite. These are the ones that I picked for this debate because I think they're the strongest. For 10 minutes to present, these are the strongest reasons that you can give, and I think that these are the kinds of reasons that you can present in arguments. But let's reflect on the fact that what are the religions that even argue for being the truth? Like, what are the religions? Like, do you see Hindus debating Hinduism being the truth? Or Buddhists arguing that Buddhism is the truth? Or Sikhs or Baha'is or Zoroastrians? Like, where's the debate on Zoroastrianism being the truth? You don't see those kinds of debates. Like, if Zoroastrianism is the truth, like Zoroastrianism is almost extinct. Like, in terms of followers, Zoroastrianism has less than 130,000 followers in the world. Like, I have more than double the amount of YouTube subscribers than there are Zoroastrians in the entire world. So these religions don't even bother arguing that they're the truth. Only you see Islam arguing this, and also Christianity. But look at the Christian arguments for Christianity being true. They're very poor. They're very poor arguments. And a lot of arguments on the basis of, oh, well, the resurrection of Jesus. The resurrection of Jesus is a historical fact. Because when they opened that tomb, Jesus was not in the tomb. So clearly he was resurrected. That means Christianity is true. These are the types of arguments that you find from someone like William Lane Craig, who is arguably the top Christian debater in the world, or in modern times, arguably in modern times. That's your argument? Like, that's such a poor argument. Like, the resurrection, like the fact that his tomb was empty, that's consistent with Islam being true as well, because in Islam we also know that Isa alayhi salam, that Jesus was taken to heaven. Like, he wasn't actually crucified, so you wouldn't have found a body of Jesus in a tomb buried somewhere or in a cave somewhere. So how is this like an evidence for God? Look at the arguments that a lot of these Christians make to justify Christianity, you have them talking about, oh, I had a dream about Jesus. Oh, I saw Jesus in, a watermelon, and that's why I became Christian. Okay, granted, those aren't like the intellectual Christians. But when you do look at the arguments from intellectual Christians, the arguments leave a lot to be desired. Like, oh, okay, please do not spam the chat. Please do not spam the chat. These intellectual Christians will talk about like love, the primacy of love. Love is everything, and we have so much love in Christianity. And like, I really haven't heard a very good argument that was not immediately like, I immediately thought this is silly from Christianity. And I'm listening to some of their top debaters. So but when you look at Islam, okay, well, how do we prove that Islam is the truth? Like, what approach should we take? And that's something that needs to be thought of very carefully. This was my attempt. You can have a different attempt. Other debaters could have a different attempt to prove that Islam is true, that Islam is unique compared to other religions. You have to think about it. It requires more thought. It requires more work. I like this approach. It can be further developed, further refined, because these 4 points are things that Islam is far and away the winner. Like, Islam is far and away the winner, and no religion can compare. Pure monotheism, no religion can compare to that. Preservation, no religion can compare to that. Amazing acts by the founder, no religion can compare. Like, things that are historically verifiable, no religion can compare to that. And then having this preserved, concrete, coherent way of life, again, no religion can compare. So these are 4 very clearly clear, distinguishing, unique factors for Islam that are not found in other religions. So that's why I focused on them. So yeah, that's the second part of the debate. Any questions in the chat? No, this is stupid. Like, every popular religion thought it was most compelling in its time. Today, Islam thinks the same. Like, wow, brilliant point. People think that their beliefs are compelling. Yeah, initially, but then you question that and you investigate and you debate. That's the whole purpose of debate. The Christian who looks at this argument that I'm making in the debate, or an atheist that looks at the argument that I'm making in a debate, has to respond to that argument, has to consider the argument and come up with a compelling response. That's the whole point of debate and discourse and dialogue. So let's look at some super chats. Brother Fahmi says, keep up the good work. Your brother from the ... country is mentioned. I won't mention the countries just in case. I don't want this brother to get in trouble for in that country. Jazakallah khair, Brother Fahmi. Furqan. Matt didn't realize when he tried to prove, quote unquote, the law of non-contradiction with a Venn diagram, he was using circular reasoning, because accepting Venn diagrams requires that you believe in the law of non-contradiction. Very good point, actually. Jazakallah khair. He didn't look good defending monkey sex in the Q&A. I agree. Brother Muhammad says, the valuable lesson from this debate, which is backed up by the PBD podcast poll results and general consensus and mentioned by yourself earlier, the arguments used in this debate will reach the minds of intelligent people and can leave the Dillahunty fan base where they belong, in their parents' basement. Exactly. Jazakallah khair. Yeah, these debates, like, there are plenty of very intelligent people who are not Muslim, and they are curious. They're intellectually curious. They're looking for the truth. They're searching for the truth. And they will benefit, inshallah, from these arguments. Maybe some of them become Muslim, maybe some of them don't become Muslim, but at least they are exposed to these types of arguments and can have like a different perspective on Islam, as opposed to the Islamophobic, really straw man image of Islam that has been perpetuated in the media. The fact that we have YouTube as a platform and we can talk about Islam and present, the reality of Islam, that's a huge opportunity. But you have these numbskulls, these Muslim numbskulls who are like, oh, why are you debating? Oh, don't, debating is useless. Arr. Okie dokie. So the third part of the debate, you can just go watch the opening statement that I made. Dillahunty was completely incoherent. Like, he was equivocating throughout the debate, or in that section of the debate, between secular humanism and his version of secular humanism. Like, when I would bring a point against secular humanism, he would say, oh no, that's not secular humanism. Secular humanism is this religion where we have these manifestos, or we have the secular humanist manifesto. That's what I mean by secular humanism. Then I would question some aspect of that, and he'd say, no, that's not my definition of secular humanism. So he's constantly equivocating. This is similar to a no true Scotsman fallacy. Like, we couldn't really pin it down, but I didn't care like what Dillahunty considers to be secularism in his own personal definition. Secular humanism has a well-known concept, well-known definition. Like, to say that secular humanism hasn't had a fair shake in the world, like, are you moronic? Like, all of these countries are secular. All of these Western countries are secular. International human rights law requires countries to be secular, that there needs to be a separation of church and state. That's what secularism is. The United States Constitution is based on secularism. This is something that is really unquestioned. But again, Dillahunty is uneducated. Like, he doesn't have a college degree. I'm really doubtful whether he has completed high school. Maybe he's a high school dropout. I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised. So he needs to hit the books a little bit and understand like what people are talking about when they talk about secular humanism. So all that he could do at that part of the debate was to shout the F word, say, oh, you F kids, you want to F kids, you're a rapist, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's just a really hilarious display of a meltdown. But, it's interesting. He has this kind of perspective on children. So I, pressed him on a few things. I said, well, are you against, 6-year-olds, 5-year-olds being sexually active? And he waffled. He couldn't give a straight answer. I asked him directly, like, should it be illegal? He said, no, it shouldn't be illegal. Okay. So if you don't think it should be illegal, then it's not significant enough for you. Like, clearly you think that marrying minors should be illegal. That's a significant thing that we have to make sure that marrying minors is illegal. It's such a moral crime. But 5-year-olds being sexually active, yeah, I prefer that they don't, but to each his own. So you have this kind of laissez-faire attitude, a libertarian attitude when it comes to little kids being sexually active in schools and kindergartens, pre-K. Who's to say pre-kindergartners can't be sexually active? They're teaching some of this stuff in pre-kindergarten and kindergarten, actually part of, the sex education curriculum that is being pushed. So, if the pre-kindergartner learns about that from his teacher, wants to try it out, wants to test some stuff, wants to experiment with homosexuality, being trans in pre-K, well, he should have the right to do that. It's a free country, right? Dillahunty has no problem with that, but is it a free country for minor marriage? No, can't have that. There has to be, the death penalty for anyone who considers that. So this is a contradiction. He's too dumb to understand the contradiction and the double standard. But there's another interesting thing that we need to watch. So Dillahunty did a live stream. I don't know. I haven't watched this clip in advance. But basically, it's Dillahunty with his trans partner, who identifies as her pronouns are she, her, trans partner of Dillahunty. So we're going to make sure to abide by all community guidelines on YouTube. We're not going to misgender this person. This is, again, his trans girlfriend. And they had a live stream. So let's see what he has to say, what Dillahunty has to say in this. I'm interested, actually, because I have not watched this.
Honey, I have a surprise for you. Wait.
You do?
Are you able to see Colin's studio?
I don't have it up right now, no.
Okay, cool. So you know how theists have priority on all my shows?
Mm-hmm.
And today we also said that anybody who's got a problem with trans folks or the LGBTQ community, et cetera, they also have priority. I have a 2-for-1. So we have
nice.
David in Arizona, pronouns are he, him, who's a theist, who has a problem with the culture that accepts trans people for moral reasons. So David, welcome to the Hang Up. Tell us what's going on.
Yeah, I'm calling because, I mean, as someone who studies science and not in biology, but, I do accept that there are different genders, but it's not as common as people are making it out to be, and for example, like the last guy, he said that he was trying to help his niece or daughter or something convert, or not convert, but like transition in some way. It's like the little girl doesn't know what she wants.
That's,
yeah,
no, you did not hear that correctly at all.
Yeah. So first of all, David. Yeah.
Go ahead.
First of all, David, somehow or another, you're getting muted on call quality here. But so the last caller had a daughter who thinks she may be gay. That's what we were addressing. And so he's trying to figure out how to best be supportive of that. But you made a claim, which we will get back to at some point, maybe, that the gender issue is not as common as some people make it out to be. Now, I'm interested how you became an expert on how common it actually is and how you overrode all of the experts to determine that it's not as common as it seems to be. But you said that you object on moral reasons, and I'm wondering what those moral reasons are.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, how can you, before I talk about the morality, I mean, this also is a part of it, but so the last guy said that, so you said that the last guy thinks that his daughter might be gay, but I mean, she's too young.
No, David. Go ahead.
Also, he knows.
No, he said that his daughter told him she thinks she's gay. He did not say, I think my daughter's gay and therefore I'm going to convert her. He said, it may be a phase, it may not be, I don't know, but my daughter told us she thinks she's gay.
Okay, so
a lot of rage.
How old is his daughter? Is she like a teenager or a?
Why does that matter?
Why does it matter?
Because the influence around them changes. It's a social influence to make you want to be accepted.
You're not saying anything. You're just saying phrases. You're not actually answering any questions with any substance. Like, what does it matter if his daughter's 8 versus 16 and knows that she likes girls? I can tell you, when I was 6 years old, I was very aware of the fact that girls and boys were super cute. I'm 6. I'm a kid. Doesn't mean I'm thinking about sex. It means I'm a 6-year-old. I think, ooh, I want to like hold hands with my friend at recess and maybe kiss them on the cheek and then be like, ooh, we kissed. Oh my God. That's the things that 8-year-olds are thinking about with regard to sexuality and gender.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, honestly, when I was 8, I wasn't thinking about any of that stuff. It's the people around you that influence you,
David,
and eventually,
David,
Oh my God.
David,
what?
David, hang on. Listen to me for a second. What you did at 8 is irrelevant. Many kids begin discovering that they feel more affection or interest in boys or feel more affection or interest in girls at very, very young ages. It is not necessarily about sexuality or any understanding of sex or the sex process or anything else. You are essentially attracted to certain things and less attracted to other things. And you notice this, evidently not, you've never bothered to study the psychology of when children begin to discover these sorts of things. But 8 is not an uncommon time frame for people to start, for kids to start figuring out what they're interested in, what role they associate with in society, and what they are or aren't attracted to. It's not always about what makes you sexually excited. But I still want to know, what's the moral issue?
All right. So now that you've mentioned that, that's where the moral issue comes in. That's why the parents are supposed to be parents and say, hey, you know, you're a man or you're a woman, and they're supposed to lead them that way so they produce a functional.
Why?
Hey, I genuinely want to understand this, because I asked about the moral issue and you didn't say anything at all that had anything to do with morality. All you said was that the parents have a role to tell kids, no, you're a boy, or no, you're a girl, if the kid suggests something otherwise. Why is it the parents' job to do that? How would the parents know what is or isn't in that child's mind? And again, what makes this a moral issue?
Because they're the parent. The parent is the leader of the family, and they're supposed to.
I'm sorry, David. I'm sorry, David. Maybe it's the fact that I'm actually philosophy minded and I have some expertise in morality.
He's an expert.
But simply asserting that it's moral because they're the parent is a non-starter. What makes it moral or immoral for a parent to either be supportive or and negating a child's gender?
I mean, was I muted just recently, or I mean, because I'm not.
Yeah.
No. So what? You know, if that's the standard, why can't a child decide I want to get married? You know, why? What society should have no say in that. You know, if I'm a certain age and I think I like to get married. In fact, when we look at girls, they're thinking about getting married and having a beautiful wedding and taking care of children from a very young age. You know, that's natural psychologically, that comes to them. So if that's what they want, who's Matt Dillahunty to say that's wrong? Why should society intervene, or why should the parents intervene? That's what the child wants. I'm a moral expert, so yeah, you have to explain why it's morally wrong if that's what the child wants. The child wants to be this or that gender. That's what the child wants. The parent has no say. It's morally irrelevant. Trust the moral expert, i.e. me. Me and Matt, the moral experts. We're philosophically minded. So let's continue.
Yes.
I'm talking over you guys.
No.
Well, there's a delay, and you are occasionally trying to talk over, and your audio absolutely sucks. So I'm going to mute you on occasion because it's easier for clarity. I also hear myself being echoed back on yours. So the issue here is, I asked, why is it moral? Why is it a moral issue for a parent to tell a kid, no, this is your gender? What makes that a moral issue? And if you just say, because they're the parent, I'm going to leave.
No. So, I mean, you're putting me in a position where I can't really say many things. But let's.
Okay, I'm going to mute you. You can't really say anything now because you're muted. I'm going to unmute you in a second. Be really careful here, David, because if all you're going to do is whine about how you're not given a chance to talk, that's not going to go very well. because I've repeatedly asked you this question, and you have yet to present anything remotely like an argument to support the notion that it is moral or amoral issue related to gender. So why is this a moral issue? You're unmuted.
Psychologically, children are not able to make decisions for themselves. So when they're young, they tend to choose things that their friends are doing or that they see on TV. And then when it gets to a point where if the parent doesn't step in and try to lead them the right way, or at least help them, they end up making decisions that are rash. Like, for example, changing, going to a doctor and having, being not, I don't want to say, I don't really know the word, but
yeah, that's because you have no clue what you're talking about. So I'm going to mute you again. It's clear that I'm going to let Arden jump in here in just a second. It's clear that you have no idea what you're talking about, not even the first step. I asked you what made this a moral issue, and your answer was that children are not able to make decisions for themselves. First of all, no child is making a decision for himself to go to the doctor, and no doctor is doing anything treating a child that would come to them with this gender issue. You still haven't addressed what makes this a moral issue at all. But I'm going to ask you a question that's going to expose how wrong you are. You said children are not able to make a decision for themselves, and sometimes they'll go along with their friends say. We all know that's true. We all know that parents are the custodians of children. They're not the owners, but they are the caretakers of children, and that children will often make bad decisions because of what their friends do. But let's imagine for a second that we have two kids, Jimmy and Johnny, and both of them say that they're trans. How does the parent tell? They're both the same age, they have the same friends. One of them says both of them say they're trans. How does the parent tell which of them is trans?
That question, that's an outlier question. Why are you asking me that?
Okay, I'm going to mute you again, just for convenience. It's not an outlier question. I'm saying if a parent has two kids that both say they're trans, what way would you say what mechanism does a parent have to be able to tell which one is trans and which one's not?
They don't have a way to tell.
Okay, if they don't have a way to tell, how could it possibly be moral for them to say, no, you're wrong, you're a boy?
How could they possibly tell?
Again, this question is meant to push
How could
whatever
you tell?
you're trying to push on me while I'm trying to make a moral.
Nobody's pushing anything.
No, sir, I'm going to mute you. This question is designed brilliantly to expose your incredibly flawed thinking.
I agree. I completely agree. Like, if, two children came to me and said, we're trans species, we're actually not human, we're dinosaurs, how could I tell? How could I tell which species is which? I'm not joking. This is 100% real, because trans species exists. We had many cases of children in school who identify as cats and dogs. This is a real identity, and anyone who jokes about it in the chat, I'm going to ban you. Okay? Be sensitive to people's identities. You have two children. They identify as trans species. How can you really know who's telling the truth? You can't. Checkmate, bigot. Checkmate, bigots. Okay, I'm serious. If you joke about this, I'm banning you from the chat. Okay, I'm warning you. You're going to be banned permanently from my channel, because this is a hate-free, bigot-free channel. And trans species children are welcome here. All trans identities are welcome here, okay? Don't get it twisted.
That a parent can simultaneously not have a way to tell whether a kid is trans, but somehow has a moral obligation to tell them they're not trans. This is a horribly broken foundational flaw in your line of thinking, your line of argument, where you wanted to say this was a moral issue, that the parents have a duty to tell kids, no, they're not trans. The only way that's possible is if your position is nobody is trans.
Checkmate.
Is that your position?
Checkmate, bigot.
That nobody, what again? I couldn't hear the last part.
Is it your position that nobody is trans?
No, of course not.
So you think there are trans people?
Yes, there are. They're very
Okay.
rare though,
And
but there are.
they're what?
It's irrelevant. He said it's rare.
They're
It's
very
irrelevant.
rare.
And nobody's asking about the rareness. The rareness is irrelevant, and you have no expertise with which to say how rare it is. But as long as you're willing to,
Like, do you doubt that there are trans species people? Do you doubt it? Clearly, they exist, and they're being genocided. They're being genocided. Again, if you are joking about this in the chat or putting laughing emojis, I'm gonna ban you. Okay, there's a genocide happening, trans genocide, and this is a big problem. SubhanAllah, like, I just can't believe the amount of bigotry I'm seeing in the chat here.
accept that there are trans people, at what age can someone begin to understand that they're trans?
At before birth.
I mean, it depends and varies on the biology of the person.
Before birth, you bigot.
How fast they develop.
In the
Really?
womb.
No.
In the womb, you
What
bigot.
biological
doesn't.
factors influence when someone is ready to understand if they're trans? I would love to know what biological factors you think are somehow involved in this process.
Their genetic makeup, for example, they might have different.
That's okay. Nope, David, I'm going to stop you already because that is literally a nothing answer. Their genetic makeup is not an answer. What factors? What specific factors influence when somebody is ready to know that they're trans?
So you're saying that
It's
when
not
somebody
biology.
thinks that they're
Now-
trans or
now
they
I'm
might be
confused.
trans, that's what I guess they're trans. Is that what you're saying?
No.
Uh,
Can
we're asking
answer
you
the
a question.
I asked you a question.
Answer, bigot.
Yeah, and but that's what you're telling me. You're saying that if somebody thinks
No,
they're
it's
trans,
not.
they
I
must be
asked you a
trans.
question. I didn't tell you anything. I asked you a question.
She asked a question, bigot.
Can you repeat the question again, then?
David.
Because
What
If that is your
biological
real name.
You said there are some biological factors that indicate when a person is able to know that they are trans. I asked you what biological factors that do you think are implicated with being able to know that you're trans?
if they, well, I mean, that's a very broad question, but I can say that if you have a penis, then you're a male, and if you have a vagina, then you're a female.
Bigot.
And
This
if
is
you
not
have
an
two
answer
parts that
to
are
the
in between-
question that I asked, David.
Yeah, I muted him, David.
Bigot.
You just said that you believe there are people who are trans, correct?
There are people that are again. Can you repeat that last part? Because it's all cut off.
Oh my God. You've already
It's-
acknowledged that you've already acknowledged that there are people who are trans.
Yes.
Okay. Then
not
there's
everybody
no
is
reason. Then there's no reason to bring up genitalia. The issue here is, how does someone know if they're trans? If there's a person who's born with a penis and they are trans, and another person is born with a penis and they are cis, how do they know, and how do you know which one is cis and which one is trans?
How do you know?
You just answered the question. If they have a penis, they are male, and if they have a
No,
vagina, they are
you didn't
female.
answer the
You are
question.
bigot.
literally the
Asked
stupidest
you the
person
are
I've had the
literally
displeasure
Hitler.
of engaging with
You are
today. So I'm
literally
going to let
Hitler.
Arden beat up on you entirely, because I will throw a fit if you continue saying stupid stuff like, I think people are trans, but if you have a penis, you're a male, because now you're not fucking listening to a word either of us are saying. So
You are literally Hitler. This caller is literally Hitler. This is trans genocide. He's denying that you can be trans woman with a penis. You can be a woman with a penis. I mean, this is obvious common sense. And I hope you learned it all in school. And if you didn't, and you went to some kind of Third Reich Nazi Germany school, and you didn't learn this, then you need to go and educate yourself.
David,
Arden, do you have any more questions for this jackass?
so my issue is you're doing the same thing that theists do all the time, and I realize you're a theist, so maybe that's why. Where I ask a question and you think that it's leading you to a specific place, so you respond to the implications of the question. Where this goes so much smoother, we actually come to an understanding mutually if you actually just answer the question that's being asked instead of trying to anticipate what is being asked and answer the implications.
The implication.
Are you able
I'm
to
not
just
insisting.
answer the question?
Can you?
I'm trying to answer the question, but it's leading me towards a place where you're going to be right
Oh,
100%
okay.
of the time.
No, this is great. David, this is great. You just admitted to how ridiculous you are. You said you're trying to answer the question, but it's leading you to a
Checkmate,
place.
Hitler.
Because you are aware that it's exposing that you have no fucking clue what you're talking about.
No clue.
You are trying to make moral implications about people's sexuality or identity when you have no justification for it.
Like, can you believe the audacity of this, this Nazi? She asked him to give some indication, like what factor makes a person realize, or what factor influences someone being trans. And he had the audacity to refer to biology, to science, to material factors. Can you imagine how stupid this bigot is? Like, science is not relevant. Like, science is not relevant to this question. Biology is not relevant to this question. You Nazi Hitler lover. Like, can you imagine that? We just got through an entire debate where science and evidence is the only thing that matters. Obviously, when we're talking about evidence and what we believe in God or not, science is relevant there. But when we're talking about gender and when we're talking about people's identities, then you want to bring up biology? That makes you Hitler. That makes you a bigot. You're so stupid. So if a 5-year-old identifies as trans, hello, you accept that. Parents, you have no say in this. And there's no way to tell. There's no way to know what a child is in terms of gender. There's no way to tell. This is like so obvious and clear to me. And I'm an expert in morality. I'm an expert in moral philosophy. So anyway, I'm so glad that we got a chance to listen to Matt Dillahunty and his trans partner. It's so stunning and brave. And bigots owned. That's all I can say. Bigots owned. Stop talking facts. Exactly. I'm speaking too many facts for you, bigots, and you Nazis out there. So let's just play a little bit more.
So I think you need to take some time, deal with
your hate,
the reality that it's making you uncomfortable, that you are asserting things morally about trans and gay kids when you have no justification for it. And you're trying to come up with one because you want one desperately, but it's not working.
No.
Because our questions are exposing it for you. So, David, we're going to let you go because you are capable of answering a question honestly because you think it's leading you to expose your problems. We're going to let you go. Have a wonderful night. Call back another time when you're ready to actually answer some questions.
Flush him.
Okay, take care, guys.
God damn, we didn't even get to his theism. But I'll tell you this, anybody can think I'm being an asshole if they want to. What you just witnessed, for this, David's a theist for the exact same reason that he's opposed to trans rights and trans identity. David's a theist for the same reason he thinks it's a moral issue, because David doesn't understand anything. I'm not convinced he even knows what trans is. If I ask you, hey, are there people who are trans? And you say, oh, yes, absolutely. And then you say, how do you tell? Well, if you have a penis, you're a male.
So stupid.
You don't even know. Yeah.
You're so dumb.
It's like saying, are there people who are gay?
These
yes.
bigots.
How do you tell? Well, if you wear shorts, you're a boy. What?
That's the level of unrelated that we're dealing with.
So stupid.
There's a difference between what someone is as a matter of ontology and what they do. And there's also a difference between the durable psychological construct, to borrow your wonderful phrase, that would allow someone.
Me. I stole that from someone.
It gets credit to you from me, but that would allow someone to identify as trans. I'm gonna make one quick tip for anybody and everybody, and this comes from Jimmy, and that is, I used to do this for other things, and for some reason it took ages for me to.
And what does Matt Dillahunty think about trans children rights? Like, should trans children have the right to go and get hormone therapy? Does anyone know this? What is Matt's actual view? Because I want to know what Dillahunty actually thinks. If he's consistent, does Dillahunty believe that children can go and get gender affirming surgery or not? I want to know, because if he is a true ally of trans people, then trans children have rights. If they want to go get gender affirming treatments, they should be supported in that. And parents, these bigoted parents, should have no say in whether trans children get gender affirming healthcare. This is healthcare we're talking about. So someone in the chat, can you tell me, what does Matt Dillahunty think about these trans children? I want to know if he's a true ally or if he's really a hidden bigot. I know if he doesn't want anyone to quote unquote F kids, but does he believe in gender affirming care for kids? Someone look that up ASAP. He's a bigot. He doesn't believe in children, trans children getting health care. He believes in puberty blockers. That's a good sign. Show me where he says that. Yeah, well, while you guys are looking that up, maybe I can find it quickly. Because I thought he might have expressed something like that in this stream, but I know I'll go through 3 hours. Let's see. I'm sorry. I didn't go through 3 hours of this these two talking to give you the clip in advance, but let's see if we can find it.
Things like that. There may be circumstance where prescribing a tattoo is not only not outrageous, but the right thing to do, right?
Yeah, sure. Yep.
And if we were gonna evaluate that, who should be making that decision? You or a medical expert?
Definitely a medical expert.
So why is your opinion seem to be different when it comes to? By the way, I want you to identify what exactly do you think is happening with gender affirming care for minors?
In terms of treatment.
What are they doing? What are they doing to children? What are they allowing children to do for gender affirming care?
Putting children on puberty blockers.
Yeah.
So puberty blockers
and
have
so
been used since like the 70s for cis kids who had precocious puberty. And there's pretty well established protocol that as long as they're not used for a time of longer than 2 years, puberty resumes within 6 months following cessation of treatment. So I don't really understand what objection you have to puberty blockers for trans kids when they're already used for cis kids and have been for decades.
Thank you. Puberty blockers for kids. It's completely safe and effective. And that's what we need for gender affirming care. If we don't give minors puberty blockers, that's transgenocide. Like, let's be honest. So I'm glad to hear that Matt is in favor of giving minors puberty blockers. And, doesn't matter what parents think. It matters what the experts think. Moral experts like Matt and his trans partner. So case closed. So people are saying that Brother Faraz is in the chat and he wants to join. So I put the link. If Brother Faraz wants to join, he can. Otherwise, no one else. I'm not gonna put anyone else on the chat, or on this stream. So if Brother Faraz, you're there, you're watching, I put you're saying, please get me in this stream. Is this actually Brother Faraz, or is it someone with a fake account? I don't know. But if you want to join, then you can join. I put the link, or just email me in advance. Oh, he's saying give me 20 minutes. I don't have 20 minutes, brother. So would love to have you on the stream one of these days, but let's try to schedule in advance, inshallah. Would love to have Brother Faraz and get him to talk to us about some philosophy. Okay. Yeah, so what I was saying is that, okay, we know that Matt Dillahunty and his trans partner in favor of puberty blockers and gender affirming care, gender, affirming surgery, whatever that entails, as long as the medical experts, as long as the experts are weighing in, don't F kids, but operate on kids. Operate. That's what trans kids need. You bigots need to recognize this. So I've said enough about that. All right, guys. So any other super chats? I'll read the last ones, and then I think it's almost 3-hour stream. We talked about a lot. During the debate, the basement dweller, Matt Delusional, told you he's a millennial, yet he's literally pushing 60. Not only are they trying to redefine what a man/woman is, apparently he's also redefining the meaning of millennial. Jazakallah khair for your super chat, Brother Famo. I don't know how old Matt Dillahunty is. He's 60, or he's almost 60? Yeah, he's 54 years old. How does that make him a millennial? Like, at best, he's Generation X. Like, he's not a millennial. He's like Generation X. Maybe he's not a boomer. Yeah, I was exaggerating, but come on. Like, he looks old. He looks very old. He could be someone's grandpa. He could be someone's grandpa, and he's making these jokes. But he got himself a nice young lass, nice young girlfriend, and his, maybe it was a midlife crisis, but he's living it. Maybe he feels so young. He feels like a millennial, with his vivacious young girlfriend and revisiting his youth. So that's why he was so offended when I called him a boomer. Age is just a number. Age is just a number. Gender is a state of mind. So yeah, Daniel, could you reenact the part where he used the F word and he said, "You big man, come say that right here"? That was a funny moment. Yeah, you didn't hear it, but I was like, when he was like standing in front of me, I was like, "Go ahead, hit me. Go ahead, do it." So James quickly intervened. James rushed. Where was that part of the debate? Maybe we should replay that. That was the funny part of the debate. Let's see. Is it here? But I don't want to play it because it's going to be too many F words, and I want to respect you guys. Maybe if I play it on mute. Anyway. Oh yeah, this part. Yeah, I'm keeping it mute because he's dropping so many F words that so like the entire audience is on his side. Oh, he stumbled a little bit. James is getting in there. So silly, like so stupid. Okay, is Brother Faraz here? You want to join? Let's see. Go ahead. Here's the link. Yeah, I know. I muted it on purpose, guys. Yeah, I should have got up to, James held me back. And once you get under someone's skin like that, then like you just have fun at that point. Like you're so angry. All right, Faraz, you have 10 seconds. Oh, we have another super chat from Brother Muhammad. Says Jazakallah khairan for everything you guys are doing. Wa iyyakum. Appreciate your super chat, Brother Muhammad. It's really good support. Okay, looks like we have our friend here. Let me just add him 1 second. Hey, assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam, brother. How are you?
Good, alhamdulillah. How are you?
Amazing. Especially now. How are you?
Good, alhamdulillah. What a nice surprise.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I have you now. My audio correct, I think. Do you hear me well?
Yeah, you're coming in loud and clear. Oh, now it's much better. Yeah.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. How are you, brother?
Good, doing good.
I see you're wrestling. You're tussling with Mr. Dillahunty.
Yeah.
MashaAllah. Him and his trans girlfriend. MashaAllah.
Yeah.
Quick question.
Sure.
Survival and reproduction. Does that sound familiar to you? The term survival and reproduction?
Yeah.
All of science, they say, points us to survival and reproduction. Yes or no?
Yeah, it's a materialist.
Actually, they will tell us that if you don't survive and reproduce, that's a type of disorder. If you have order, you have reproduction. If you have disorder, there's no reproduction. So for instance, if I have a disorder in my sexual reproduction system, I don't reproduce. There's a disorder.
Mm-hmm.
The disorder can be found at every level. It could be psychological, they say. It could be physical. It could be a societal issue. Disorder goes with the inability to survive and reproduce. Is it not? Isn't this the consensus they have? When they look at all of science, they say, look, survival and reproduction is pointing us in one direction. What coupling of human beings can you put together that will survive and reproduce? There's only one. The man and the woman. Politics, Aristotle, book 1. I thought he's ridiculous. Why is he bringing this up? Now, today, I understand why he brought it up. They had the same issue in ancient Greece. People, the term platonic relationship comes from, men being friends and not having certain activities between them. Plato put an end to these certain activities. He tried to put an end to these certain activities. That's why they call it a platonic relationship. It comes from the term Plato. Survival and reproduction, they're pragmatists. They keep telling us about survival and reproduction. Okay, then we go into society, they tell us, no, here's a lifestyle where you don't survive and reproduce. it's not pragmatic. If we're talking about pragmatism, it's not pragmatic. What do you think about that?
What they'll say in response is that it's actually survival and reproduction are not the highest values. You know, survival and reproduction is an explanation for, you know, how we as human beings are the way we are. You have Darwinian evolution, but actually in terms of our moral decisions and how we operate our lives, it's not about survival and reproduction. It's about pleasure. It's about your personal pleasure and your choices, what you decide to do as a person to fulfill yourself, whatever your definition of happiness is. So to play devil's advocate, like this is the response that they would give, that we have to prioritize pleasure. So if two men want to be together, if you want to be trans, if you want to be gay, well, that's what makes you happy, and we have to support that, we have to respect that, and we have to facilitate that through medical advancements, pharmaceutical advancements in society. So that's the kind of atheistic response that they would give.
Okay, great, but that's psychology. I'm talking about, first we'll go to every level, but I'm talking to you about our genes. They tell us our genes are here to reproduce. Yes or no?
Yeah.
That's what this is. I'm going in their worldview for a second. Okay. Their worldview is that, look, your genes are their only objective is to reproduce. What lifestyle allows for reproduction? If I have a genetic issue that doesn't allow me to reproduce, they label that as a disorder. Do they not?
Right. Yeah.
I had my genetic fitness was not good enough. My genetic fitness was because we'll get to psychology later. I'm happy to go to psychology. I'm talking about from their materialistic worldview. They say, when they look at the world, they say, look, the world is all about survival and reproduction.
Right.
Do my genes replicate if I'm in a certain type of lifestyle? The answer is no. How did they used to label that? From a genetic, because don't forget, a materialist philosopher, he only has to see, Matt Dillahunty can only see chemistry and physics. There are no souls in Matt Dillahunty's view. Actually, we'll get to the hard problem of consciousness. Materialist philosophy cannot account for metaphysics in any sense, in any way, shape, or form. We'll talk about it maybe later. Okay, we'll get to that. But in terms of survival and reproduction, because their whole thesis is that they observe the world, human beings replicate, life replicates itself, and if it doesn't replicate itself, it had some type of fitness inefficiency. Would Dillahunty be willing to admit this? In terms of genetic fitness, because look at it the point this way, if you don't mind, Daniel. What percentage are they at now? 15%, roughly? Gen Z, I believe. No, of LGBT, the alphabet.
Yeah, it depends on which
Generation
survey,
Z?
but Generation Z is maybe up to 20%.
Okay. What happens when they get to 45%? What happens when they get to 99%? What's their fitness value now?
Yeah, it's just approaches zero.
What happens? We have a societal collapse, yes or no?
Well, they're developing artificial wombs and genetic technologies to prevent that.
Okay, but you still need a man and a woman. You still need a certain male and female characteristics to make these artificial babies. Yes or no?
Yeah, I agree. Like I agree with where you're going. The whole liberal project, though, and what someone like maybe not Dillahunty, but another maybe more intelligent atheist would say is that we should not be bound by our biology. Like biology should not determine our future. We can develop technologies that will allow us to perpetuate the human race through genetic engineering, artificial wombs. We can even develop like the sex gametes, like the sperm and the egg. We can even artificially generate those now using stem cell technology. So they are constantly going to try to run away from biology. They're going to try to constantly run. That's what causes this kind of conflict, because on the one hand, as you're pointing out, Dillahunty is wanting to talk about science, scientific evidence, but then when he wants to talk about gender ideology, it's irrelevant. Biology, science is irrelevant. But look at this conflict here. I don't know if you can see my screen. Let me share it. Look at this conflict. There's a huge clash between Richard Dawkins and Matt Dillahunty. Dawkins is like this old school. He's talking about the end of gender, debunking the myths about sex and identity. So this is like a materials view that you're giving, like the about survival, fitness, all of that is what he's talking about. And he says, if even half is true of what she says about the intimidation of scientists in her field of sexology, we need to support the fight back. Okay, then Dillahunty comes in and says, how many other things have you strongly recommended on the basis that, quote, if even half is true? Just effing retire. You're an embarrassment. So Dillahunty comes in, guns blazing, says, with respect for Matt, I'm compelled to add my voice to those condemning this awful tweet. Dawkins isn't his best on Twitter, but this response to a tweet about scientists and academics being harassed is ridiculous and unwarranted. So they're calling Richard Dawkins their hero, the new atheist hero. They're talking about saying he's a transphobe, he's a bigot, he's causing trans genocide. And Dillahunty, the white knight, comes in and then says, is it about scientists being harassed, or is it propaganda from transphobes about transphobes being called out? So this was a big conflict that happened on Twitter back in 2021. And this is where there's like a break between the new atheist, old school types who are like Dawkins, and then this kind of Dillahunty type of woke atheist that is in favor of LGBT trans ideology.
I find it to be incredibly entertaining. It's funny. It's interesting to see them clash. But my point is this. Will Dillahunty, would he admit that there's a greater genetic fitness value to being heterosexual? That's an honest question. Is there a greater genetic fitness value?
You could say yes. Let's imagine.
Okay. We say yes.
That.
Okay. So me, I care about my progeny. Now, Matt Dillahunty might not care about his progeny.
Yeah, that's how he'll say. He'll say that there's no moral component to that. Like, you prefer something, I don't prefer it, but you're not showing how what your preference is morally right and mine is morally wrong.
Okay, but now we're not doing science. According to science, we're deemed as more genetically fit. Our lifestyle is deemed as more genetically fit. Yes or no?
You mean Islamic? Yeah.
Well, people who propagate heterosexual relationships are by definition gonna reproduce.
Yeah.
That's what it takes.
Yeah, at a higher rate. Yeah.
Okay. Now, what he's talking about, that's lifestyle. He's saying, look, his hierarchy of priority is my happiness. What makes me happy? Okay, man on man makes me happy. That's what I'm gonna do. That's what he's trying to say. Okay, fine. That's his business. And the Islamic worldview is God is first, and then family/society. We're gonna do what's best for our relationship with God, morality, being a good person, pious. We're going to think about God. We're going to worship God, etc. And then to family/society. We're not living for our own selfish desire. We have a communal sense. Now, his belief is his belief. Our belief is our belief. That's subjective. That's your lifestyle. But when we're talking about science and physics, do you think he would agree if you brought him on and you challenged him and said, hey, your lifestyle doesn't lead to survival and reproduction. Ours does. We have a greater fitness value than you. Doesn't he consider science to be the objective observation and study of the world?
Yeah, I mean, he could concede that, but there are potential counter arguments that he could give.
Please.
Like, you could say that, well, you can also have more fitness if you just don't have any prohibition on fornication. Like, just allow people to commit zina and just sleep with whoever they want, like a true sexual revolution. And you'll have more babies that are produced out of that. So from a Darwinian perspective, the fitness value is higher if you don't have hijab, if you don't separate the genders, if you don't have deterrence against zina, you don't have a shame culture, you're going to also have a higher fitness value.
That I would completely disagree with him. Fatherless children, if you set men loose Look, the poorest
Well,
communities we know.
that's not
listen,
fitness. Like fitness is just in terms of reproduction, like the pure rate of reproduction. Then you're talking about lifestyle, like fathers.
No,
like
but-
now you're getting into the lifestyle.
Hold on a second. You give me a community. Two rival civilizations. Because don't forget, if survival reproduction also demands that we outcompete those around us. You give me one civilization that doesn't know who their father is. They have intergenerational poverty. You give me one civilization that knows who their fathers are. Guys, we have 100% proof of this.
No,
Fatherless
look at the
children.
proof of it now. Like look at the European, the power that Europe and the West has over the Muslim world. Do you think Muslims know more about their lineage than these liberal Westerners? Of course, Muslims know more.
Of course.
Yet we're being dominated materially. So when you have an argument that's purely based on fitness or these kinds of materialistic standards, then actually the Islamic society is not going to win out in that sense.
Okay, well, let me ask you a question. What's the number one baby name in London? You're saying the West.
Muhammad.
Muhammad. Okay, Alhamdulillah. That's London.
Yeah, but look at
Islam is
Muslims
growing
dominant?
peacefully. Islam is growing peacefully, and it has a lot to do with the nuclear family.
I absolutely agree with you. Like I absolutely agree with you, but I would base an argument on these kinds of values, like the value of family, the value of marriage, the value of having children, the value of knowing your lineage, the value of a community, the value of God and worshiping God without partners. I would base an argument in those. They're universal values. If we try to base an argument on pure reproduction and survival and utility, then Islam will not come out on top, because Islam is not trying to maximize that. Like Islam is not just trying to maximize the number of people on earth. Islam is also not trying to maximize like our GDP, like, because atheists often make this argument, like we can determine whether atheism is better than secularism on the basis of which countries have a higher GDP. Muslim countries have much lower GDP than secular atheistic countries. Well, that shows that Islam is a bad way of life or a bad philosophy. We don't accept that argument, right?
No, we don't. But also, what I'm trying to say is there are many reasons why Islam technologically is being dominated. Okay, we can get into that slowly. But in terms of being a genetic dead end, because first I want to approach it from his worldview, and then of course we could look at it as a sociological experiment. From his worldview, the nuclear family is more fit. Yes or no? He's a materialist philosopher, and I assume he adopts evolution.
I don't know if he would accept that, but let's just say he does.
Okay, if our
For the
fitness
sake of
value,
argument.
if our fitness value is greater, if our way of life also makes sense scientifically. Scientifically speaking, we're living to our true potential. We're surviving and we're reproducing. A certain lifestyle might not be. Actually, a certain lifestyle might be headed towards a genetic dead end. There's no survival and reproduction. There's no there's no passing down of their genetic material. Now, are they doing that at the cost of their own personal happiness? Fine, that's their business. Now, if you want to talk about it sociologically, you're right. I would say Islam has a different priority. Now, we say God first, family / society second. We don't live for our own personal happiness. You know, I tell my children, if you live for your own personal happiness, the irony of it all is you're going to be depressed. You're going to be sad. I would tell you that if I'm living for my own personal happiness and my wife is living for her own personal happiness, now we're in sociology now. We're no longer talking about evolutionary fitness. She's living for her own personal happiness. I'm living for my own personal happiness. My children are living for their own personal happiness. Maybe my son has blue hair and he believes in communism. And my other son, he's an anarchist maybe. And my wife, she believes in something else completely. We're completely divided. We have nothing in common. I don't feel connected to my family whatsoever. Don't forget, I would tell you that an element for happiness is to have a healthy society. If we all start living for ourselves, you're going to have a divided society, which you see that in the West already. People don't have anything in common with their children. Their children actually, you could see, I mean, there's division in every society, but you could see that they don't pass down their traditions and way of life, because go out there and find your own way of life. Liberalism leads to massive division. They don't think alike. They don't believe in the same things. They have no common threads. They actually will have more in common with people on the other side of the ocean. And if you look at the West, they need immigration very badly. Why? They don't have kids anymore. The women in the West are telling the men in the West, we don't want to have your children. Actually, if you get us pregnant by accident, we're going to abort the child. It's a type of self-destruction. Liberalism, in my opinion, is going in the direction of self-destruction. Tell me what you think about that.
No, I agree. I completely agree with those points.
There's no unity. What are they unified on? Liberalism, if I could put it in a nutshell for you, it's and liberalism is more complicated than this. Do what makes you happy, but don't harm anybody else. Go on your own. Go on your own. Find your way in life and do whatever makes you happy. Hey, you like mac and cheese. You want to eat mac and cheese every day till you die? That's your business. Stuff your face as much as you want. Go and live by any way of life you want. Just don't harm anybody else. Yes or no?
Yeah, that's
okay.
No harm principle.
Okay. This way of life leads to misery. Would you agree or would you disagree on that?
Yeah, that's part of life. That's part of a holistic way of life.
Because what is happiness? What brings somebody true happiness? You remember Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
Yeah, it's actualization, self-actualization.
Self-actualization. What's self-actualization? Something bigger than me, something more important than me. You have to go beyond the ego. If you live just for yourself, Abraham Maslow actually guys, for those who don't know, he's the father of psychology. They call him the father of psychology. Okay. There's a hierarchy of needs. First, if you don't have food, water, shelter, heat, you can't self-actualize. You can't start thinking about bigger things. You're hungry. You're not thinking about, excuse me, you're not thinking about, hey, how am I going to pay the rent? I'm starving right now. Okay, after that, you need security. Then after that, you need to accomplish things. You need to feel good about yourself that you're contributing to society. After that, he rewrote his pyramid because he realized that's not enough. Human beings break down psychologically. There needs to be something else. Self-actualization is finding something that's bigger than you. Guys, this is Western psychology. They're telling us, look, if you don't connect to something bigger than you, you're going to lead to misery. And he has great quotes where he gives you a dire warning. He says, if you don't accomplish this, you will find misery. Look at in the West. Look, there are many good things about the West, but one thing is they're extremely divided. Everybody's looking for their own personal happiness, which leads to a type of heathenism. The Romans went through it. Then they became extremely conservative. They converted to Christianity, became extremely conservative. Why do you think they became so extremely conservative?
Because things were going wrong.
The lifestyle was too painful. They had disease, they had broken homes, they had all sorts of disunity. Everybody's trying to satisfy their most primal desires. You're living in the jungle. You're living in the kill or be killed. There's no order. People love harmony. People love to connect. People love to, I always say, in the Garden of Eden, Adam alayhi salam, he was lonely. Was he not? Human beings, we need to connect with one another, and also we need to self-actualize, meaning we have to connect with something higher than human beings. Or else, what's the point of life? We're going to fall into nihilism. Because here's one thing Dillahunty's worldview doesn't account for. Liberalism leads to nihilism. I dare anybody to tell me it doesn't. Please, make a case for the fact that liberalism won't need to lead to nihilism. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
It definitely does. I don't know if you caught the earlier part of the video, but I was talking about analytic mode of thinking. And if you just doubt everything, like you doubt God, that's the start. You start doubting the external world. Am I really a brain in a vat? Is this all a dream? Is there actually a reality outside of my own head? So when you start doubting everything, are there moral truths? You had some atheists in the chat who are saying there are no objective moral truths. Like it's just subjective, people's opinion about what right and wrong, but there's no answer. Then yeah, that is that mode of thinking, which is doubt, leads to this kind of nihilism that you're referring to. So I absolutely agree.
Not only that, the better your life is, the more happiness you accrue. The sadder it's going to be when you die. Think about it. If you're nothing but matter in the void, if you're just chemistry and physics, look, the person who had a miserable life, he woke up in this world a leper. He's happy to die. He's like, death is coming. Release me from this life. The opposite is true of the man who had a good life. He actually shot himself in the foot. He had a good life. Human beings, we need to connect with something higher, or else our mothers might as well given birth to us in the grave. What was the point of this life? It's just all noise, and the Quran says this. Allah says, did you think I created this world for nothing? There's no meaning to it? He has to face you know why he gets so angry when you bring up points? I assume he didn't engage with your points about intuition.
No, he didn't understand.
He just kind of flew off the handle.
Yeah.
His deep, you saw how emotional he got.
Yeah.
I could tell you he's a very unhappy human being. If you're a happy human being and you're content and somebody's yapping, you're having a good day, you're happy, it doesn't bother you so much. You got under his skin. He actually confronted you. He walked up to you. He's acting like a WWF guy. Like, he's frustrated. He has a deep frustration. Now, I'm doing psychology here. I'm telling you, in my opinion, the guy's a deeply frustrated man. And wouldn't you be? Life is meaningless. You have, very limited time on this earth, and your body's betraying you. As you get older, the body betrays you. You can't have pleasure with the body as you once were when you were younger, etc. Life gets more and more nasty, more and more difficult. And then one day he's going to die, and it was all for nothing. Yeah. Temporary pleasure. It's a psychological type of torment. If you don't have God, you meet nihilism. I dare anybody to try to tell me this isn't the case.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's very sad existence, and they just lash out. Like I felt he was just lashing out at me, venting his frustration, and
why does he care so much? Why is he so upset? Why is he so aggravated? Because if God is true, and I'll tell you something, Daniel, I don't believe there's anything. I don't believe there's an atheist. I don't believe there's one atheist that ever existed. I don't believe there are any atheists. I believe that deep down inside, every human being knows God exists. One day we'll have a discussion about this. I really feel that I can point to this in a way that a vast majority of people will acknowledge it. Okay.
Well, it's a fact that people have the natural intuition that there's a creator.
People have the natural intuition.
That's established fact.
I believe it. But here's the other thing. I talked about you. I heard you. I was listening to your live stream on my way home, and we're talking about how do we know Zeus is not God? I'd like to chime in on that if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Okay. You see, John Locke and many philosophers, he said everything that's in your head, in your mind, was once in the senses. So when I was born in this world, he says, look, the world was a tabula rasa. See this blank mouse pad here?
Blank slate, yep.
Yeah, you're a blank slate. You're a virgin piece of paper. There was nothing written on you. Then you saw the color red, and now in the mind, there's the color red. Then you saw a flower. Now in your mind, there's a flower. You smelled the flower. Now in your mind, there's this idea of perfume. You heard the birds sing. Now you have the sound of birds singing in your mind. But he says, once it's in your mind, you can now compile these ideas. So imagine I never saw a red flower. The only flower I ever saw, I'm a newborn. I saw a yellow flower. But my father was wearing a red shirt. I saw the color red. I saw a yellow flower. Now in my mind, as I grow older, I can imagine a red flower. Even if red flowers don't exist in the world. I could take two ideas, both of them which I experienced. I had to experience them. They had to go through my senses, either hearing, taste, touch, sight, smell, etc. It goes through the senses. Once it's in the senses, now it's in the mind. Once they're in the mind, we can go another step. What's the other step? I can think of the Marshmallow Man. You know the Marshmallow Man? Mm-hmm. I saw a marshmallow. I saw human beings. I compiled the two in my mind. I made up the Marshmallow Man. Actually, Descartes would tell us there's nothing you can dream up. There's nothing you can paint, draw, or talk about that you haven't experienced in your senses. Even if you have a dream of a face you never saw before, that's a collage of faces you've seen in your life. You get where they're going with this?
Yeah.
Everything that's in the mind was once in the senses. Now, I will tell you that we're born with the idea of God. I never sensed God. I never sensed God in the world. I never looked under a rock or flew over the sky and saw God. But yet I have the idea of God. Now, those of you who say God is the God of lightning, Zeus is the God of lightning. They took the idea of God and they compiled it with the idea of lightning. Now they have the God of lightning. Eros was the God of love. You saw a beautiful girl, you fell in love. Now you have the idea of love. And now you have the idea of God, and you made up a God, the God of love. That's why the Quran is strictly telling us, don't associate partners with Allah. Allah is not part of the creation. All the things you had in your senses, don't mix that with the idea of Allah. That's how we know Allah is not Zeus. Zeus is like Santa Claus. Santa Claus is made up of things we've experienced. You've seen a man in the world. You've seen a sled in the world. You've seen reindeer, and you saw a bird fly. Somebody mixed up all those ideas once they were in the senses. He mixed them up in his head, and he drew Santa Claus. Now he believes, he's telling stories to a child about Santa Claus. Maybe the child believes it, but the child doesn't understand epistemology. Later on, he realizes, hey, you know what? There are no Santa Clauses in the world. There are men, there are slaves, there are deer, everything that composes Santa Claus. Flight exists, yes, but not Santa Claus, not all of them together.
Right.
When the Quran describes God about being completely separate from his creation, this is exactly what they're telling us. Now, if somebody says so and so is a man and he's God, he's creating he is committing the greatest, most arrogant sin a human being can do. He's saying, look, me and God mix it together. Now I'm a God. And look, let me draw this God like myself. Every civilization you go into, they draw that God like themselves. The black community, they have to worship the white man's picture. In Asia, he's Asian. In China, he's Chinese. In Africa, he's black. In Japan, he's Japanese. So on and so forth. They took the idea of Allah and they did something so haram for us, what the Jews promised they would never do. Would you mix the idea of Allah with the golden calf? Would you say, if Allah can do anything, God can do anything, come back as a man? Would God come as a golden calf after he made us swear never to worship the golden calf? After he made us swear never to worship any emperor, any man? Would Allah ever come down and deceive us in this way? To mix the idea of Allah with anything is haram. And that's why every other God, pagan God, cannot be so. Now I'm going to give you one more point, then I'm going to be quiet, okay? What's the first number you learn? 1 or 2?
1.
1. All numbers are referring to the number 1. 1 is the only objective number. Every other number is subjective because they require, the number 2 requires the number 1's existence. Without 2, try to explain to a child the number 2 without referring to the number 1. It's impossible. The number 1 is objective. The number 2 is subjective. It relies on the existence of number 1.
Mm-hmm.
The number 1000 relies on the number 1. The number 0.5 is a reference to the number 1. You could not have dreamed up of a God, or you could not have dreamed up of multiple gods before if let's say I'm going to grant their premise that God is made up. Let me grant that premise for a second. You can't dream up 2 gods at once. First, you're going to dream up a God, and then you're going to dream up a second God, and a third, and a fourth. So there had to be one God. We had to start with one God is what I'm trying to say. You can't start with the number 2. We all learn by the number 1. It's a necessity. It's a logical necessity. You have to think about it, okay? But there's no way around this. And here's the other thing. Socrates said, look, if there were 2 gods, and the true definition of God, they would be one and the same. There would be no difference between them. You cannot have 2 gods. 2 gods is a logical impossibility, according to Socrates. But I would tell you this, okay? Everything you mix with Allah, that's where you get paganism. That's why the Quran tells us every religion was true, but it got corrupted. Yes, Zoroastrian was true once upon a time, originally, very likely, maybe not, okay? Maybe it was a false prophet, but could have been true. But they mixed the idea of Allah with fire. We lost track of what happened to Zoroastrian. It could have been a prophetic teaching when it was pure, but they mixed the idea of God and fire. Now they have a type of fire God. Please, let me know your thoughts on this.
Yeah, the shirk and associating partners with Allah, like that seems to be the pattern. That's what is referred to in Islam and the Quran. And this is also the pattern when we look at the history of religions, is that so many religions, they have the belief in one God as a creator, but then they mix that idea. They create images, they create representations, like figural representations, they create statues, and they just associate these images and statues or people or even angels, because some people were worshiping the angels and saying these are the daughters of Allah, some of the Jahili Arabs. So this seems to be like a recurring pattern, and Islam comes as pure Tawheed and says that no, there is no associate with Allah, and there's no representation like a figure or a statue of Allah. He's beyond anything that you can imagine. So yeah, I completely agree with your analysis. MashaAllah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Now I want to ask you another question, so we can kind of hammer this home. Okay.
Okay.
Can you picture in your mind right now a coal pie?
A what?
A coal pie.
Coal pie, like pie the number, or pie?
No,
the
no,
dessert?
nothing to do with the number. But I just want you to picture it in your mind.
A kopie. No, I can't imagine it.
You know why you can't make? You know why you can't picture it? Because I made it up. That sound doesn't attribute to anything in the dunya. It doesn't. It doesn't. I just made it up. I took 2 syllables. I stick them together. I made it up.
I thought it was like a special type of pie. I was getting hungry.
Getting hungry.
Yeah.
Lunchtime. You cannot associate that word with anything. How do we learn words? Well, if you see sunglasses, you teach a child, look, these are sunglasses. Now the sound sunglasses is associated with this object. I cannot teach you what words mean with other words. So imagine I would try to explain to you what a dog is without showing you what a dog is. And you have no experience with animals. Like, you don't have any experience with anything like dogs. And I tell you, look, a dog has 4 legs. Now I have to use more words to explain what the word for and what the word legs means. And I tell you, look, the leg is an appendage. Now I need more words to explain what an appendage is. And I have an infinite regress of words. How do we stop the infinite regress of words? Infinite regress of words. We take a child, we show him a dog. We say, look, see this dog? Come pet him. Come say hello. This is a dog. Or I show him a picture of a dog. We need experience. Without experience, these words mean nothing. Case in point, if you see a blind man, he's the most intelligent man in history. You cannot explain to him the color red. When you say the word red, to him, it's just noise. Like when you heard kopie, to you, it was just noise. When I tell you the color red, you cannot picture it. You have no experience with the color red. However, when I tell you God, you never say, what is that? What's God? What? I never heard one single human being ever tell me that. Why? We're born with the belief in God. It's innate. Rationalists, we believe we're born with innate ideas. It's inescapable. We can hammer it home. It's inescapable. I'll give you the greatest philosophical objections to this claim that I'm making. I know them well. Okay, David Hume objected to this, but we'll talk about that later. You cannot know what Allah means unless you have direct experience. Now, I'll ask you one question. What's the only book in the world that says you saw God, you gave an oath to God, and then you were born into this world?
It's the Quran.
The Quran. The Quran is accurately describing the human condition.
Right.
When you talk to me about kopies, I don't know what you're talking about. If I was a blind man, I don't know what you're talking about. If I never tasted honey and you're talking to me about honey, I don't know what you're talking about. Unless I tasted sugar and you'd be like, hey, honey's like sugar. Okay, I have a bit of an idea. But there's nothing like Allah. Nothing. The Quranic description of Allah, there is nothing like Allah. Yet when I talk to you about Allah, you know. And he's nothing to do in the dunya. Nothing. How come you know? How come you can talk back to me? How come it's not like when I talk to you about kopie? When I talked to you about kopie, you didn't engage. You didn't even refute. You didn't come up with an argument. Like Parmenides said, he says, you can't talk about non-existence. If something doesn't exist, you can't talk about it. There's no attribute. There's no attributes for me to discuss. Please let me know what you think.
No, I think that's true. Like the concept of God is because there are certain concepts that people naturally have universally. Like this idea of a blank slate has been completely refuted. Like people universally have a concept of the sky. People universally have a concept of water. People universally have a concept of an artifact, like a man-made thing. And people universally have a concept of spirit beings, like people or like minds that don't have bodies. So this caused a problem for psychologists or people who are empiricists because, well, where do we get this idea of a mind? A mind that has a will, has knowledge, but there's no body. That's not something someone has seen. So they have different theories of how that develops, but it's definitely an intuition that people have prior to any kind of cultural influence or teaching of religion. So that's what the cognitive science of religion talks about a lot.
I agree with you. I couldn't agree more. But it goes even further than this. It goes even. You'll notice that John Locke, an empiricist who believes in tabula rasa, okay, he doesn't agree with us. He doesn't believe you're born with innate ideas. Tabula rasa. Can I ask you a question? What's a tabula rasa? That's an analogy for something that's not in the material world. The tabula rasa is never in the senses. You see how they cannot escape. They cannot escape metaphysics. Dillahunty was telling you, show me objective truth, show me objective truth. Even John Locke couldn't escape using metaphysics. Science, here's a very important question that I feel is not being even asked. Is science absolute? Dillahunty, from my understanding, as I don't want to put words in his mouth, he thinks science is absolute. Everything you know has to come from science. David Hume says, look, if it's not math, it's not science, cast it to the flames. Is the scientific method, meaning, what's the scientific method? You run a test, you have a hypothesis, you run a test against it, it's observable. We have to have empirical data. It has to be going through the senses. It has to be repeatable. Karl Popper, it has to be falsifiable. It has to be predictive. There's no perfect definition of the scientific method, okay? I'm giving you in a nutshell here. But it's inductive knowledge. I have to have sensory experience. I'm a tabula rasa, they say. The empiricists say, I'm a tabula rasa. I'm this virgin sheet of paper. And then when I have sensory experiences, I'm going to write on this virgin sheet of paper, okay? I'm a tabula rasa? What is this woo? What is this metaphysics you're appealing to? You're trying to say on one hand, there's no metaphysics. It's all science, science, science. But wait a second, your whole worldview is resting on this analogy of something you cannot put in a test tube. Whoever put a tabula rasa in a test tube, he started off with metaphysics. What I'm trying to tell you is metaphysics is inescapable. He had a religious experience, because I will tell you that truth is a religious experience. He had a religious experience of this thing called tabula rasa. Tabula rasa. What the? Can you do me a favor? Can you put a tabula rasa in a test tube for me? Can I measure this thing that you're telling me? You're telling me this is what I am? Where is it in the world? Oh, it's an analogy. An analogy for what? An analogy for what? Something metaphysical. The whole worldview is impossible. It starts off with the very thing they're negating. That's why the Quran says, don't they consider their own selves? They always negate their own selves. Let me tell you, if don't get me, I'm going to take a break here and let you chime in. But it's impossible to escape metaphysics. We need religion because metaphysics is inescapable. Please, let me know what you think about this.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, even if you want to talk about objective versus subjective, like the difference between what does that actually mean? Like objective versus subjective. You have to engage in metaphysics. You have to engage in something that's beyond the material to be able to discuss some of these simple concepts. And it just goes back to the point that reality is more than just material. Reality is more than what the senses can observe. And every atheist who opens his mouth, you know, within one or two sentences, he's immediately engaging in metaphysics. He's immediately invoking concepts and deploying concepts that go beyond the material realm and beyond science. So
he has to. He has no choice but to appeal to metaphysics. Now, in physics, they tell us water is H2O.
Right.
When the water goes through the senses, that's how you experience H2O as water. Now, H2O, can you show me H2O in its objective form? H2O, they turned the whole world into mathematical abstract phenomenon. The water is H2O. That's really what it is.
Right.
That's an appeal to a whole metaphysical world we have no connection with. That's what Kant called the noumenal world. Kant said, look, there's a world, we call it Kantian wall. You have no access to this world, the world of H2O, things in themselves. And then after they go through the senses, you have this phenomenon, because that's what you were asking. You were asking him, hey, prove to me there's this noumenal world. Prove to me you're not a brain in a vat. This might be too deep for most people. You know, it might be like really too far, but you're 100% right. He has to account for it and he cannot. But here's another thing. Here's something more simple, because I think I don't want to lose the audience here and going too deep in metaphysics. Are you aware, is everybody out there aware that science is a circular? It's a circular belief system. Science, and David Hume, the greatest atheist probably in history, admits to this. He says, look, science is based on inductive reasoning, not deductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning means I go from a set of particulars and I make a general claim. So for instance, I say, I see frogs swimming. I write to my scientist friend. I'm in Greece. I'm Aristotle. I see 100 different frogs swimming. I write to my friend in another country. I say, hey, do you see frogs swimming in your country? He writes me back, says, yes, all the frogs in my country swim. Then I ask other associates, and all of a sudden we have a consensus. You know what? All frogs can swim. But we've only seen 1%, less than 1% of all frogs in existence. We have to, at one point, make a generality. Because frogs swam in the past, we now make a claim that frogs will always swim in the future. Science is the belief that the future will behave like the past. Now, how do you know this? We ask them. They say, well, because in the distant past, the future behaved like the past. It's circular. There's no corroborating evidence. Now, listen, I trust in science. The Quran tells us, look, the future is going to behave like the past. The Quran tells us to believe in science. It's an axiom. It's a faith that the future will behave like the past. The Quran tells us to. We're in harmony with them. I'm not disagreeing that the future will behave like the past. The Quran tells us, look, how are you going to come to life in the next life? The same way I brought you in this life. How did you come to life, Daniel? You don't know. Nobody knows. You think Dawkins knows? You think they know the process? Nobody knows. Believe me, it's far beyond anybody's comprehension. However, even this atheist will admit the anthropic principle. Thank you. Any philosophy we have, any worldview we have has to account for life because we're having a direct experience of life. Look, we used to not exist. Now we exist. God says, look, when you die, like I brought you out of death the first time, like I brought you out of non-existence the first time, I'm going to bring you out of non-existence the second time. Does the Quran say this or no?
Yep.
God is telling us, look, have faith. Like you came to existence the first time, I'm going to bring you into existence the next time. The Quran is telling us, yes, have the faith in this axiom that the future will behave like the past. Now, why do scientists not believe that we're going to resurrect in the future? Why? The whole premise of science is that the future will behave like the past. Why not this particular event where we were non-existent and we came to existence? Answer me this question. Why not? Why won't it happen again?
You really can't make that judgment. On inductive principles, it should be possible.
It should be. Actually, their whole premise, science is completely dependent on this one premise. I dare anybody with a degree in philosophy of science to come here and refute me. I dare anybody. It's a challenge to the world because I know there's going to be a lot of internet guys and be like, oh, it's completely false. I dare anybody with credentials. I'll do a live stream with anybody at any time to come and prove to me what I just said is wrong. That science is based on the axiom, and I accept this axiom, by the way, that the future will behave like the past, and that's pure faith. We have an inclination and intuition to believe it's so. When I'm driving my car and I press on the brake, I believe that it's going to stop the car because it has so in the past. It's deeply instinctive in our we're created to believe in this. Now, let me ask you a question. If you
one more
yes,
question.
yes, sorry.
I have to pray Dhur.
Yeah.
I have to go pray Dhur.
Okay, brother. Do you want to do it another day? Or do you want me to wait for you?
If get one more point in, please, just to conclude it. But we need to have a separate session, dedicated podcast, so that we can really, because we didn't really get to appreciate your full repertoire, inshallah. So we'll get to have that opportunity, and we'll get in touch. But just if you have one more point to wrap it up, because it's just saw that I have to go and saw that.
If you grew taller, that means before you were shorter. If you're now heavier, that means you were lighter before. If you died, you had to be alive. If you came to life, you either call it dead, non-existent. Like we came to life the first time, we're going to come to life again. This is the promise in the Quran. And science believes in this axiom. Why don't they believe we will come to life again? And let me tell you something. Time, people are, oh, that's going to take maybe billions of billions. Who cares? Time is movement. If there's no movement, there is no time. When you're dead, I waited a long time to be born. I didn't feel it. Like when I die and I go into this earth, when I resurrect, it's not going to feel like it was a long time for me. Why? Because I didn't experience motion. If you don't motion, time is dependent on motion. Just like you woke up in this world, the Quran tells us you're going to wake up in the next. I find that to be a very suitable evidence because I already lived it once. When the non-believer asked the believer, hey, do you think God can resurrect us when we're dust? Yes, Allah says, yes, I can resurrect you like I did the first time, and he can recreate even the fingertip. Now you think from a drop of blood, he can recreate the fingertips. What's on your fingertip, my friend? Something so unique to you. Your fingerprints are so unique. We know that our blood gives us our DNA, and our DNA can give us our fingertip. That's a sign, the Quran says, for those who know and reflect. Like it happened the first time, it'll happen again. Let me tell you something. Science also believes this. When we wake up in the next world, they're going to say, oh, of course we woke up in this world. By the way, the Quran says when they wake up in the next world, they're gonna say, how we wish we were dust." You know how they say we're just chemistry and physics? That's just dust, chemistry and the void. When they resurrect, my brother, they're gonna wish their philosophy was true. They're gonna bite their hands. They're gonna, I wish I was just dust. Dust being.
Hello.
Yeah. Sorry. You there? You hear me?
Oh. Yeah. Are you back?
Yeah. Did I cut off?
Maybe I cut off. No,
I wrapped it up. We're done.
Okay. Yeah, I heard all of it. Barakallahu feek,
Jazakallahu khair.
brother, for coming on. We really
Thank
enjoyed it. Everyone in the chat really enjoyed it. Alhamdulillah.
Inshallah.
So we're gonna get in touch. Okay.
Inshallah.
We're gonna get in
Inshallah.
touch, and we're gonna have a
I'm gonna text you my
dedicated
email.
philosophy. You know, we're gonna go nuts on philosophy, inshallah, and discuss everything. So I really appreciate it. And appreciation for everyone who joined the stream, and there were a lot of super chats. So barakallahu feekum for that, and we'll catch you on the next one. Hope everyone enjoyed the debate, and we will be live again very soon, inshallah. Catch you on the next one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum.